Good morning, everybody.
Здравствуйте. Hello. Nice meeting you, everyone.
How are you, colleagues?
Hi. Known faces everywhere. Great. I know you from Hungary.
Yes, yes.
Some of you.
Familiar faces. It's nice.
So hello.
Hello.
Yeah. So you know her from Hungary, where I'm from.
Sorry?
Okay, you know that lady from Hungary, but
No, I am from Hungary, but
who
she visited us. So she was at our university a year ago or two.
It was 3 years ago. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, it was a great experience. We certainly matched your country and loved it very much.
And we enjoyed your presentations. We learned quite a lot from it.
But it
Gave
was
you new ideas.
too long. It was too long. It was the very beginning of our round table. And I hope today I'm the first, as usual, but I don't want to be so long as it was in Hungary.
Well,
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning. Hello, Zhao. Good to see you. Good to see you. Finally got in touch. So in your case, it's not morning, it's afternoon already.
No, it's quite afternoon fine for us, but it's too early for you.
Yeah, because we were trying to exchange emails, but I wasn't receiving her emails.
And all our emails, including Professor DIE and email to you have been rejected. All the have been rejected. End. So we will try. Xue give me your Gmail, and I think we better try to be connected by Gmail. It's easier.
Okay. Anyway, it's good you're here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone, actually, including our Hungarian friends and participants. Thank you for responding to a call on such a short notice. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Правильно.
Okay. I have no idea whether we can turn on captioning during the meeting. Do we really need that? Professor Lovashi, do we really need it? You think we need it? We can ask our techie, I don't know. Татьяна Вячеславовна, мы можем субтитры включить? Это как вообще делается? Я не очень понимаю.
Я, честно говоря, сама не знаю, как это делается. Сейчас я узнаю Марушу.
Женя, вы идете первая?
Yes, I'm ready to be the first. I'm a pioneer today.
Yeah. You're going to set the pace for the discussion.
Before we start, and we have a couple of minutes, can you tell me how Zoom functions? How to share the presentation? Because this is
Zoom
the first
functions?
time I meet it, and it seems pretty.
Oh, you don't use Zoom probably.
I use
at
other.
your school.
We use other tools.
Down the screen, you see
Share screen
at the bottom of your screen, you have share the screen option.
Yeah.
So you click the share the screen option.
Yeah.
Then you see your screen and you see your presentation on the screen.
I see you there.
Did you click share the screen?
Oh, I see now. Okay.
Yeah. Here you
Great.
go. Now we see your screen. Right.
Excellent. All the things I want to hide.
And
right. And how do I get out of it?
Up. You go up the screen and it says end.
Stop sharing.
Presentation.
Okay. So it's safe, full safe. I just have to grow up to it. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So more and more participants are joining.
Hello, Martin. Nice to see you.
Hello, Tatiana. Здравствуйте. How are you?
Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте. Everything is fine.
Good to see you and welcome to the
Professor Sharp.
discussion.
Good to see you.
Mikhail, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, colleagues.
Good friends and partners from Germany.
Lisa.
Lisa.
Hello.
Lisa, you are here.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning, Lisa. You still have morning, right?
Yes. You do.
So,
how is everyone? It's lovely to see you.
In the afternoon side of today is Rong, Professor Rong from China, right? Everyone still has a morning. Okay. We still have 1 minute left, and we have a few participants who are still not in the conference. So let's wait another couple minutes. I think we have more or less, well, not everyone. We don't have Professor Kitty Pollock for the first section, for the first set of today's presentations. Anyone knows, anyone from our Hungarian friends knows whether Professor Pollock will be joining us this morning? No?
No idea. I have no information about her.
What do you think? Shall we wait for another 2-3 minutes before we start? Let's wait another. Oh, she's joining us. Right. Okay. Hopefully, the remaining participants will join us in a few minutes. And let's begin. Again, good morning, everyone. And welcome to our roundtable discussion, the pandemic crisis and post-pandemic recovery, challenges for public administration. And again, I'd like to thank you for responding to our call on such short notice. Really value and appreciate your contribution and your willingness to share your ideas and thoughts with us. The title, the post-pandemic recovery, part of the title at least, under the current circumstances seems overly optimistic, especially in the light of the Omicron variant spreading rapidly across countries and continents. Countries are introducing new travel restrictions, and possibilities of new lockdowns remain very real. But even if we do not take the emergence of the Omicron variant and the still far from clear consequences of that into account, the impact of the pandemic, the impact it made on the global economy and social and political developments in all countries, as well as on international relations, is so profound that a complete recovery is nowhere in sight. Indeed, in low-income countries, for instance, only 6% of people have received even one dose of a COVID vaccine. And as the New Yorker magazine puts it, could face devastating surges as both Omicron and Delta variants rip through the population. Even in the US, with all its wealth, 40% of Americans have not been fully vaccinated, let alone received a booster shot. In Russia, for instance, fully vaccinated are over 63 million people, which is less than half of the entire population. But of course, it's more than 50% of the adult population. I need to say, though, that some countries are doing very successfully. And we were supposed, and we do have some of our friends and partners from Qatar here. In this country, for instance, as far as I understand, over 90% of people are fully vaccinated. Therefore, given all those figures, there is still room for the pandemic to spread, and societies will continue to experience its devastating consequences. The UN framework for the immediate socioeconomic response to the COVID-19 crisis warns that, quote, the COVID-19 pandemic is far more than a health crisis. It's affecting societies and economies at their core. While the impact of the pandemic will vary from country to country, it will most likely increase poverty and inequalities at a global scale, end of quote. However, despite all remaining uncertainty, the world in general, as well as all countries, should develop and start implementing strategies and policies of economic and social recovery. Effective socioeconomic response poses a significant challenge for governments and systems of public administration. These policies should, in my view, also reflect a fresh approach to the problem of achieving efficiency of public administration. Big and urgent problems require new solutions and new approaches. Otherwise, the lessons of the current crisis might not be learned. Having said all this, I need to say that we have a very good mix of scholars representing different countries participating in our roundtable discussion. Given the variety of topics suggested by our participants, we decided to arrange all today's speakers into 3 main sets of issues to be discussed. I hope you've taken a look at the program, but in general, initially we will discuss major and most formative challenges to governments and societies posed by the pandemic, as well as the variety of responses by national systems of public administration. Secondly, we will focus on some important social and socio-psychological aspects of the current crisis and the experience of handling those problems. And finally, we will touch upon the issue of labor market developments and the transformation of the employment sphere caused by the pandemic. Please note that not every presentation will be followed by the question answer session. We will have short, brief question-answer sessions after each of the three blocks of three thematic blocks of today's discussion. And in the end, if we have time, we will have a general discussion on all issues raised by our participants. Now let's start our discussion. And our first presenter today is Dr. Evgenia Andrushina. She is from Moscow State University, from School of Public Administration, Moscow State University. Dr. Andrushina, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to see many familiar faces today. And thank you, Alexander Yakovlevich, for giving me the floor and the honor to open our roundtable. And I would like to express my personal thoughts on public administration in a pandemic, a course towards statism or good governance. And I note right away that this is my position, and maybe my topic is provocative. And I would like to encourage all of us, all of you, to take part in further discussion.
Evgenia, excuse me, will you please speak a little louder?
Okay.
Could you please speak a little louder?
Okay. I'll give the maximum score to my microphone. So I'm starting. So it's evident that the COVID-19 pandemic has made significant dramatic adjustments to national and global governance systems, again revealing fundamental problems about how exactly government systems should evolve. What are the conditions for their effectiveness and the ability to quickly adapt the new biological and anthropogenic challenges? And it seems to me that the pandemic was a unique obstacle and at the same time, an opportunity to change public administration, to change the format of relations between a state and political ruling regime and society. And the undoubted negative consequences of the pandemic were such failures in public administration as reduction in productivity, inconsistent approaches to tasks, poor judgment in the absence of the usually available sources of support, guidance, and advice, loss of effective oversight in relation to important decisions. And yes, the pandemic has become another test of the strength. It was a trial, a kind of a trial of the population's trust in the authorities, population trust in state. And many countries with open, democratic political regimes have passed this test hard. However, along with this, a number of countries mobilized in a very short time began to take often harsh responses to the spread of pandemic in the form of mandatory restrictive measures, compulsory vaccination, a ban of movement, leaving people's home, etc. And it's not surprising that countries with undemocratic ruling regimes, strong traditions of statism, traditional collectivist values, they begin to cope with COVID-19 faster and better. It seems to me that in conditions of crisis, in conditions of uncertainty, the demand for centralization, the use of authoritarian methods in combination with some features of political culture, features of ruling regimes give its positive results. And I'd like to prove my ideas by the opinion of my colleagues, professor of political analysis department, professor in political sciences and social policies, Professor Grigorieva, who noticed in her report State Policy During a Pandemic, Restrictive Measures versus the Rights and Freedoms of Citizens. She showed how different states from different world regions pursued health policy during a pandemic and its assessment by the population. And despite the fact that during periods of relative stability, according to some data on the quality of medical services, the United States ranked first in the world, yes. And while China ranked only 50 or 51st place, COVID-19 changed the view of the practices of formerly prosperous countries that found planning gaps, breakdown of the decision-making process into narrow areas with a high need for interagency coordination. And the best results in the fight against COVID-19 were shown by non-democratic countries, but by some Asian countries. However, at the same time, we must acknowledge that fact that in pandemic, social needs inevitably increase with rapidly scarce and dwindling resources, and collaboration is critical. It's also necessary to take expert opinion into account while policy making, since the state singly shaping state policy turned out to be unprepared to act in non-standard situation. So it seems to me that in emergency, the role of state structures inevitably increases, and this leads to the expansion of its power, and while unfortunately the infringements of the rights and freedoms of citizens. However, studies and practices of deliberative communications between various governmental and non-governmental actors within the framework of a network approach, good governance concept, show the effectiveness of interaction between the state and society while implementing a so-called social anti-crisis technologies. What do I mean by saying social anti-crisis technologies? These technologies are associated with a change in attitudes towards risks and crises by accustoming public opinion to the fact that risk is a norm. It is a part of our ordinary life. This position can be promoted by experts, by opinion leaders, to prevent panic, to prevent exaggeration of threats in society, and to explain the fact that the state is not omnipotent and the state can make mistakes. And the core idea is the idea of unsafe society. And in this term, the reaction of the political leader is very important. But what are the specific tools to implement these social anti-crisis technologies? Democratization of a political regime, yes, and the legal regime too. Decision makers comply with safety rules, it's important. And spread of information on different types of risks. Spread of information on areas of high risk for citizens and for tourists too, and tax incentives for the production of safe equipment and for all the economic sectors. And just in conclusion, it seems to me that in the context of global crisis today, we can observe a turn towards statism while simultaneously incorporating the practices of good governance in the interaction between the state and the society. So that is my final statement. Thank you for your attention. Maybe it was a very provocative, but I'm sure that the statement is the main trend in public administration in terms of crisis. Thank you, dear colleagues.
Thank you, Dr. Evgenia Andryushina. Our second speaker today is Dr. Laszlo Lovashi. Dr. Lovashi, the floor is yours.
So no sound.
Would you please turn your mic on? Thank you. Mm-hmm. No, we still can't hear you. No, you have your microphone turned off. Professor Lovashi, you still have your microphone turned off. You need to click on the microphone in order to switch it on. No, it's still turned off. It's turned off. In the left bottom corner of your screen, there is a microphone sign. Yeah, now it's on. Now it's on. You can speak. but we can't hear you for some reason. Professor Lova, we can't hear you. I think we'll give a little more time to Professor Lova to fix the problem.
Okay.
Oh, now we can hear you. We can hear you
Okay.
now.
Okay. Thank you. So I'd like to share my presentation with my screen, the laptop screen. I don't know. We can handle this.
Share the screen.
Yeah.
Just hit share the screen option.
Yeah, but I have to use two devices for sharing screen and access to audio. So let me start with my presentation, and I can circulate my short presentation and slides later. If that would be okay. So my title is COVID-19 and the European experience in terms of history and conclusion. Let me begin by Jennifer Wright's history of birth, plagues, and the heroes who fought them. She reviews the worst epidemics in history in a humorous way, pointing out how many lives have been put at risk by rigidity to dogmas, disinformation, inconvenience. No secret, many. The biggest lesson,
excuse me, you would probably need to turn the sound off at your second device. At your second device, you are not using now. Yes, you have two devices now. You need to turn.
Okay. Now
yeah, it's better, okay. Much better. Yes.
Not better.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So, what the biggest lesson? Misidentifying the origin of diseases and rigid adherence to them on a political basis can also contribute to the spread of epidemics. Examples of the former are bubonic plague or cholera, and the latter is Spanish flu. Spanish flu is not of Spanish origin either. Epidemics can affect history, as can smallpox, which almost completely wiped out the 7,000-year-old Inca civilization in just 1 year of its introduction. That is, it was not the weapons of the European conquerors who killed most Indians. Unfortunately, the vaccine-hesitant people don't even know about it. What happens to people? Based on experience of previous pandemics, it is possible to see and perhaps estimate the social processes that will take place after the coronavirus epidemic. Based on patterns so far, after COVID-19, following the example of the so-called crazy 20s 100 years ago, following the Spanish flu, epidemic trends may reverse. People will have a much broader social life, turn away from religion, spend more, see inflationary pressures, and have freer sexuality, spread of sexually transmitted diseases. What happens at the strategic level? It is questionable whether we are learning from the mistakes of the past. Emergence of a new type of influenza pandemic in Asia in mid-2009 has rapidly created a situation in which the production of sufficient vaccines for the world population has become a key issue globally. Nevertheless, all countries were unprepared for the situation in 2020, and even previous indication from the WHO that the 21st century may be the age of epidemics were not taken seriously. Nevertheless, it also seems that the distrust of individual, certain foreigner, for example, Sputnik and Sinopharm vaccines, has been fueled by many political and market, but even professional actors, making a political issue out of a fundamentally health issue. There is no doubt that there are vaccines that have been developed by relatively new technology, and the epidemic has also contributed to the greater and much faster acceptance of new genetic-based technologies. Some words about present time. We don't have enough and appropriate information about everyday interactions to stop the spread of the epidemics. See lifestyle in scientific research. Lifestyle research should reveal where people spend a lot of time together, how long the contact lasts, and the nature of the contact. Because we don't know much about latency, why the virus is mutating by billions, since humanity has nearly doubled since 1970. What we tend to forget. In addition, social media providers may even have more information than public health governments. Moreover, as the healthcare system can be held responsible for up to 10 to 20% of preventable causes of death, lifestyle information, for example, overweight, obesity, etc., is also becoming more valuable. The new technologies, one of the research results of the Hungarian researcher Qatar in the field of mRNA vaccine offer a completely new perspective. In the 1970s, the first gene sequencing took weeks and cost millions of dollars. Today, it is approximately $1,000. Genetic modification can be easily achieved by inventing the CRISPR gene editing technique. It becomes a fundamental question whether a person himself will be able to modify based on this technology. And some words about the future. Based on experience, how will the COVID-19 epidemic change our lives in the long run? Workplaces have been able to partially adapt to the epidemic using, for example, the home office solution, but not all jobs can be done remotely. At the same time, education could change completely the lifestyle. It was 100% online, even where it was impossible and mostly pointless for very young children. A break of several months will have a greater impact and toll on the social development of very young and adolescent children than we might think. The epidemic had a significant impact not only on food, but also on purchasing habits in general, including consumer prices and traders and producers. According to previous FAO model calculations, a 100% decline in GDP globally will result in an additional 80 million malnourished people. And food prices are expected to rise, which could lead to another migration crisis in many countries. In addition, international stability is threatened by the epidemic, since only 55% of the world population has received at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine, and only around 7% of people in low-income countries have received at least one dose. Unfortunately, the share of people having the third shot is the highest in my country, Hungary. Refugees and economic migrants have been particularly exposed to the virus due to their living conditions and limited access to healthcare in their home countries. If the virus reaches refugee camps and spreads like wildfire, it could also further intensify illegal migration, which also hampers stability in international cooperation processes. And we arrived at the last thought of my presentation, and I'm looking forward to taking part in further discussion during this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker today is Professor Vasily Stratov from Moscow State University. I hope he will not be offended if I tell the participants that Professor Istratov is a veteran of Russian diplomatic service as well. And he served at many highly ranking diplomatic positions, including the position of Russian ambassador to Azerbaijan. So welcome, Professor and Ambassador Istratov. The floor is yours. And as far as I know, Professor Istratov is going to cover a very intriguing topic everyone is very concerned about. So please, Professor Stratov.
Thank you very much. I'm not offended, of course. I will not speak about Azerbaijan at all. But as far as I wouldn't say it is interesting, it is alarming. I mean, the point I'm going to raise in many ways. One of the, first, we live in another epoch. Epoch had changed. We have not noticed it yet, but there is a joke, of course, as always, there is a joke about it. In Russian, it sounds that instead of this abbreviation before the new era, as we call BC, we have to use before the beginning of the epidemic, before до начала эпидемии. Same in English, since BC could be translated as before coronavirus. Meaning that the whole environment is changing. And since the world is changing, rapidly, but we can see it changing all the time. And from time to time, we cannot understand how much it has changed. Well, when we are speaking about the collapse of human mobility in 2020, 2021, and unfortunately on and on, as a rule, we are mostly concentrated with the collapse of the hospitality industry in general, meaning hotels, airlines, car rentals, museums, festivals, whatever. Yes, it is a problem. It is a problem, probably, much more a problem than for industry in general. In some countries who depend, critically depend on tourism, it might become even a problem, which is not just a challenge, but close to a collapse of the economy. Yes, in some countries it's worse, in other countries it's better, but I remember that some 20 years ago, the Mediterranean countries were preoccupied with that too many tourists are coming to their countries, and it is bad for the environment, it is bad for historical monuments, and it is bad for their countries in general, because they were speaking about something like 360 million foreign tourists a year coming to Mediterranean countries. Yes, today it is different, but I would like to raise a little bit different point. Not just receiving side is suffering, but those who use the travel. I do not mean just for leisure. Leisure is there, and of course there is, there used to be a substantial proportion of the population who are not ready not to go for a warm sea in the New Year period or something of that sort. yes, leisure is there, but unfortunately there is another point, and the point is related. Yeah, there was a previous report related to historical background of the current epidemic. Yes, we will speak about history as well. And here I mean that after each world war, there was a collapse of human travel. Well, we'll speak about the First World War first. My grandfather graduated from Moscow University in 1906. So in 10 years before the First World War, he traveled to practically all Europe, plus Egypt, plus Africa, plus India. And that was not a problem at all for him. Well, when much later in the mid 70s, as a student, I went to a former GDR. By the way, the same for my grandmother. She traveled practically everywhere but for India. When I went for the first, my foreign country, which was a former GDR, her sister was still alive, my grandmother's sister. Oh, that's Berlin. It's probably the worst city, capital city of Europe. She was comparing it with Rome, Vienna, and Paris. So for that generation, it was, well, easy, no problem. By the way, no visas. No visas. The visas were introduced only after the First World War. So there was one limitation. Another limitation was the division of, let's say, well, former United Europe into Soviet Union and the rest of the Europe. The rest of the Europe was traveling more or less, while the communications with the Soviet Union were practically cut. Same for the situation after the Second World War, when half of Europe was traveling, another half was not. And that was a problem which had changed dramatically some 30 years ago, a little bit more than that. The Hungarians must remember that they were the first to open the border with Austria in 1989. And that was the beginning of the collapse of the same GDR, but not Hungary. Well, so in these 30 years, at least for the continent of Europe, and not just for the continent of Europe, we were in a situation when human travel became very easy thing. And at the beginning of the 90s, you were able to find, well, we will speak about not Hungarian speaking, not Chinese speaking, but Russian speaking people practically everywhere. It is coming to the end. It is coming to the end because the division of the world is division between the groups of the countries depending on the kind of vaccine they use. So one vaccine is open for one country, one bunch of people, and another group of vaccine is open for another. And they do not communicate as of now, and there might be a possibility that it will go on and on. Another thing is, which, well, Professor Levshin mentioned that I used to be a diplomat. Well, from 96 till 2006, I was deputy head of our North American department. I mean, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then that was the period when we were communicating with our American colleagues practically all the time on all levels. Later on, in some 5 years after that, well, the major problems of our relations with United States, and not only United States, but later on with other countries as well, by depending on a situation when there was a lack of communication on the level of the presidents. President Medvedev and President Obama, President Putin, President Obama, Trump, and now Biden. Yesterday, we had something which might replace, so they do communicate right now like we do via video conference. It is better than doing nothing, but it is not the thing which is needed, because I must say that in the 20th century, in the late 20th century and the 21st century, the international relations rely badly upon human relations and human communications, looking into each other and trying to understand each other. In case we do not do that for a year or for a decade, the problems tend to multiply. And the problems tend to multiply not only in human behavior, not only in human relations, not only in the lack of a possibility to understand others and show yourself to others, but in the relations of the countries. And later on in public administration as well. Well, I had a problem because unfortunately at this particular moment, my watch stopped. So I checked the time in my iPhone, and now I realized
1 minute.
Stopped.
You have 1 minute.
Right. Okay. So actually, I'm coming to that. So if I do not mean that we can change the situation, we can all coming together and claiming that there is a problem and we must fix this problem. We cannot fix this problem because it was given to us by something much more powerful than our ability to resist it. But we must understand that the problem will multiply and we will have to deal with that and the consequences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Stratov. It's fascinating and personal for myself as probably for yourself, because I was also growing behind the Iron Curtain.
One thing to mention, for 15 years, my wife and myself, we would go to Vienna and Budapest in December or January. This year, I had to cancel that for the second time. And I'm not sure whether I will be able to begin this, habit of mine later on. And that does not mean that there's a personal problem only. It's a problem of the peoples. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So our next speaker will be Dr. Kitty Pollack from Hungary, from University of Public Service. So we had this general overview of European policies and European approaches presented by Professor Laszlo. Now we have more on Hungarian focus with regard to Hungarian public administration response with regard to the pandemic. So Professor Kitty Pollack, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank you for the possibility to be with you. My presentation today is titled as Hungarian Public Administration During Coronavirus Challenges and Solutions. Therefore, due to the time limit, I would only highlight 3 questions related to Hungarian public administration during coronavirus. First, it would be regarding the regulation of the second special legal order in Hungary. Secondly, I would like to highlight only few questions related to administrative proceedings during coronavirus. And lastly, I would like to make some remark about the centralization and decentralization tendencies. So first, we should note that there is 2 main models which has emerged in a constitutional regulation regarding the special legal order. First is regarding the common law model. It is based on the constitutional general clause, and the special legal order is derived from directly or indirectly from constitutional rules. Secondly, is the second model is the continental model, which includes countries whose constitutional rules contain detailed provisions regarding special legal orders. And Hungary has a detailed provision about special legal order. We should note that also, meanwhile, we have a detailed regulation about special legal orders. The global coronavirus epidemic was unexpected at the level of constitutional regulation, first in Hungary as well as in European countries. The constitutional regulation regarding the state of danger were firstly not spread regarding the restriction related to mass illness like coronavirus, but it was on the act of the healthcare regulated the situation and the institution of health crisis, which primarily focused mostly on the transformation of the healthcare system. The government finally declared the state of danger due to COVID-19 human epidemic in March 2020, in the middle of March 2020, first in Hungary. Due to this regulation, the government had the opportunity to suspend the application of laws in its decrees and deviate from certain provisions of law. As the general rule, these government decrees remained in force since short term, unless it was, and it was always, extended by the parliament. The Hungarian legislature also recognized the deficiencies of the regulation. Therefore, the transitional acts on coronavirus and the act on healthcare ensured the legal basis for imposing restrictions in Hungary. The termination of the state of danger was announced by the government on 17th June 2020, and according to the fundamental law, so according to the Constitution of Hungarian law, is the government who has the right, the exclusive right to declare and terminate state of danger, not the parliament. After June, a temporary act on healthcare introduced a new special legal order, the epidemical preparedness, basically for summer 2020. And from autumn 2020, we are also living under the rules of state of danger, actually today. Regarding the state of danger, regarding the restrictions, regarding the rules, I would like to highlight only a few regulations regarding and few remarks regarding administrative procedure law. One of the main features of the special legal order, state of danger, is that certain fundamental rights can be limited as part of it. In Hungary, the constitutional order in case of state of danger, the restriction of certain procedural rights, like civil procedures, administrative procedure rights, can also be limited. These procedure restrictions apply in particular to academical situation to reduce the number of human contacts, of course, and certainly this has also effect on administrative procedures too. It is important to note that in the broad sense of administrative procedure law, administrative judiciary and rules regarding administrative justice can be also noted. And it is very interesting that due to coronavirus special transitional procedure rules, which were accepted regarding administrative justice, but first not regarding to general rules of administrative procedures. Interestingly, in administrative procedures, for example, regarding social administration, radically new procedure measures were not introduced, but general rules of administrative procedures should have been used. And regarding rules regarding administrative justice, new regulations were introduced, such as there was a short time when there was regarding restrictions regarding personal contact. We should also note that, of course, there were sector regulations which were introducing special procedural regimes, but it was very interesting that it still remained, these special procedure regimes still remained after the termination of the state of danger. Finally, we should also note regarding the long-term consequence regarding also administrative procedures, but also regarding public administration, that we can see that digitalization and e-contacts are getting more and more used in Hungarian public administration too. Lastly, I would like to make some remarks regarding the centralization and decentralization tendencies. Of course, overall, at the time of the crisis, even it is the coronavirus or not, the centralization tendencies, which are sometimes directly or immediately required by the situation, are getting stronger. This is quite logical. However, in Hungary, we can note there were other contrary tendencies and trends too. Let's see some examples for these two tendencies. So for the centralization, we can note that the government declared in a decree that taxpayers should not pay tourist tax, and tourist tax goes immediately to local government's budget. Also, the government, in one government decree, it was said that the entire revenue from the car tax became a part of the central budget revenue, not the municipal budget revenue. Meanwhile, the collection of this car tax is still delegated to town clerks and remain their administrative tasks. Meanwhile, we can note that all powers of the city council, so the local government's council, were delegated to the mayor. There were some special powers which cannot be delegated, but most of the powers were delegated to the mayor. Then the mayor could exercise that he became basically the local government's legislative power. And that's proof of, for example, the of decentralization. It was the possibility for the mayor to decide stricter rules regarding curfew and wearing masks too in the local government's territory. So these were the few points I wanted to highlight regarding public administration challenges and some solutions in Hungary. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Polak. Our next speaker today is Dr. Olga Lova, who is representing our School of Public Administration at Moscow State University, and I'm using this opportunity to thank Olga for her contribution to arranging today's events and for her contribution as one of the organizers of today's event. Thank you, Olga, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Lishin. Good morning, dear colleagues. I will be the first speaker with presentation, but my presentation is very short. You can see that there is only 5 slides, and the first one is with my name, so I'll just miss it. So I just wanted to highlight some main changes in public governance concerning business support. In the last decade, my country, Russia, faced 2 severe economic crises, and the pandemic crisis became the 3rd one. And on the slide, you can see the main priorities of government support for businesses. The first crisis was in 2009, and we have direct financial injections to system-forming large-scale companies, because our country have the specific large part of huge and state-owned companies. And the second crisis of 2014 and 15, we have the other focus of government support, and a lot of funds were directed to capitalization of bank system. And it was the idea of that measure was that they will be like intermediaries who will provide these funds to industries, but it was not very successful. And you can see on the slide that some measures were also granted to SMEs, small and medium enterprises. They get grants for innovating firms, extended requirements to get SME status, some additional benefits, and some tax benefits also took place. And the current crisis, pandemic crisis that we have now, their focus of government was switched to their small and medium enterprises. And why is it so? If we try to analyze their blocks of measures to overcome coronavirus, we can see that in Russia, the main directions are general to the world's trends. So we are in their universal trend. We have measures to in the sphere of healthcare, in the support of the population, bank regulation, some supporting measures for regions, and of course support of businesses. And as to the last point, there are concrete measures which helped businesses to overcome the first severe part of coronavirus crisis. They are on the slide. So it were loans for businesses, financial assistance to them, for example, covering loans, grants to pay salaries. Some measures were only for small and medium enterprises, for example, reduction of taxes, some benefits of insurance, rental payments, and so on. System forming enterprises, they also get some support, especially in the form of preferential loans, but in the main number, in the main sum of funds that were granted, they were not so big, so large as it was in the previous years. So we also had reduction of unproductive business costs and administrative barriers, and protection from bankruptcy, not only in Russia, but in Germany, I know, and in some other countries, the same measure was introduced. It was moratorium for insolvency, and in Russia, it was the reason how the number of bankruptcies decreased a lot. And it was a good reason, a good measure as far as I can see. And we have less bankruptcies now than we have 1 year ago. And as for industry support, all industries get reduced insurance rates, some postpones in payments, and subsidies. And why the greatest financial support is granted to SMEs? Why not to large enterprises? So this is the main idea of my speech. So we have the shift of priorities in government policy, in public policy, in business support. First reason is that this strategy is closely related to the task of supporting their self-employment of the population. People who lose the job, they had an opportunity to start their own business, and the government wanted to stimulate them to do it. And among this type of enterprises, small and medium ones, there is a large proportion of service and trade enterprises that suffered from coronavirus crisis a lot. But there are some unresolved problems. They still are in our economy, and not only in our economy, as far as I consider. For example, we have quite a large shadow sector, and due to this reason, not always the funds which were granted to SMEs, they get to their people who wanted to get them. For example, I have one friend, he's a businessman, his company is a trade company with China, and so he have barriers during the corona crisis, and he wanted to get this loan for to cover salaries for his employers, and he had 22 steps to get them this credit. in one of the state banks, and he was really surprised with this. So we have problems of poor digitalization, how to get these funds to the beneficiaries. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lvova. I think we need to discuss economic implications of the crisis and economic responses of governments to the crisis. And thank you for drawing our attention to this fundamental shift in Russia's policies with regard to economic response in terms of having developed a set of measures to support small and medium enterprises. I know that Russia has adopted in 2019 a law on social entrepreneurship, which started to be implemented in 2020, and it's also entirely on supporting small and medium-sized businesses by government loans and all types of benefits given to the government. Those small and medium enterprises that focus specifically on social issues, on relief in terms of social crisis caused by the pandemic. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Dr. Lisa Von Yarswell from UNISA in South Africa. UNISA, as far as I know, is the largest university in South Africa. Is that true, Lisa?
Yes, that is true. Thank you very much. It's so lovely to see you all again, colleagues. It's so lovely to see you all again.
Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you. UNISA is the biggest University of South Africa, the biggest university on the continent. And we are currently busy with our exams. It's the end of the year for us because we work from January to November, December. And for this exam, we had just over 27,000 students writing public administration. So we have been marking a lot. But let me share my presentation with you. And thank you so much for inviting me. It's so lovely to be with you again today. Let me just see, where can I enlarge this? Now it's showing over my, can I just present it like this?
We can see it well.
Can you see? That's excellent. So I'll skip the first slide because that's basically focused on my name as well. So if we go to the second slide, things are always not working the way it should when you are presenting. Let's see. There we go. So I just want to give a quick overview of the pandemic to start with in South Africa. So our lockdown started on the 23rd of March 2020, and we've been in constant lockdown since then. It's only the levels that differ. Sometimes we're on level 1, sometimes we're on level 2, sometimes we're on 4. So depending on where we are, we've been in lockdown since March 2020. And it just depends on how we are doing with the current pandemic. So that influences the level that we are in. Currently, we're on level 1, so we are quite happy because that gives us quite a bit of freedom. So we are happy with level 1. Now, when the pandemic started in South Africa, we were very, very worried because if you look at the country, we have a huge problem with poverty. We've got a lot of people that lives in poverty. We've also got a large number of our population that's got HIV and TB. So we've got health concerns from people already, and we did not know how the new pandemic is going to affect people with HIV and TB. We also have low education levels, and then we also have a healthcare system that is sometimes struggling, especially the public healthcare system. The private healthcare system is very good, but the public one is struggling. So for a population of 60 million, we've got 7,195 ICU beds, which is very little. But as we've realized, as we've gone through 3 waves of the pandemic, that we actually do cope with that, because if you look at our total number of deaths to date, it's close to 90,000 throughout from the start of the pandemic till now. For the past 24 hours, we've had 9 deaths, which is not that bad if you compare it to other countries. And for our number of infections to date, it's just over 3 million. So although we've got constraints in terms of our healthcare system and our number of ICU beds and people with pre-existing health issues, we are not doing too badly, and we are very thankful for that. Now, through the 3 pandemics that we've had to date, we have made a lot of progress. And before Omicron started, we have put in place a lot of sharing of resources between the public sector and the private sector, a lot of sharing of resources and information between private hospitals and public hospitals, because if we left the whole pandemic to the public hospitals and the public sector, they would have struggled severely. So there is a lot of sharing taking place where public hospitals are not able to cope with the pandemic. If they get full, the private sector takes the patients. If they run out of supplies, they share supplies. So it's been this huge collaboration between the public and the private sector in terms of handling the pandemic in South Africa. We also implemented COVID-19 grants for the vulnerable in South Africa. So as a lot of people in South Africa is working part-time and they're in the hospitality industry and in the tourism industry, they lost their jobs due to the number of restrictions placed on South Africa. So we had our unemployment that increased tremendously. And at some point during the pandemic, when we had flight bans that we currently have as well, we had up to 40% of unemployment, which is very, very high, but it's due to part-time employment in tourism and industry. So government implemented tourist grants for COVID-19 vulnerable people that lost their jobs. And that really assisted them to get through the pandemic and still be able to buy food and care for their families. Then we also started with the production of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and we are the first country on the continent that is producing vaccines. Now, this is important for us because if you look at the African continent in total, there's only 3% of the whole continent that's vaccinated. South Africa is vaccinated a lot more, but if you look at the continent with all countries in total, it comes to 3%. And that's mainly due to the shall we call it the demand by first world and developed countries to keep vaccines for themselves instead of sharing with the rest of the continent and with developing countries. So some countries are really struggling to get vaccines. So we've started producing Johnson & Johnson vaccines in South Africa. We're the first country, and we are focusing on making it available to other African countries that is struggling to get vaccines due to the developed countries keeping vaccines for themselves, where you find that some countries have vaccinated 3 times or even 4 times. Some countries have not vaccinated the first time or the first dose on the continent. And then we've also implemented regular family meetings. Now, this is what the president of South Africa calls when he speaks to the nation. He does not call that a formal meeting. He calls it a family meeting because he sees South Africa as a big family. So he calls a family meeting. It's usually Sunday evenings at 8 o'clock. And since we're all part of the family, we all listen to the president. During the pandemic times, if we're in a wave, he will speak every Sunday. In between waves, when we have low infections, it's every 2nd or 3rd week. So it's a nice way of keeping people informed in South Africa, but also to say to them that you are a part of the South African community, and I'm talking with you, not at you. So we have had a lot of family meetings with the president to date. Now, in terms of vaccinations in South Africa, we've had a big drive. As you can see, there is one that is currently going on because we are going into summer. It's nice and it's warm, and we are going into holidays. So it's saying, save our summer, save the festive season, go for your vaccine. And we've had this big drive in South Africa, which is called the Vuma Vaccination Project. And this is trying to vaccinate as many people as possible in the country. So during weekends, we will have vaccinations at shopping malls where people go shopping, they'll vaccinate them. During the week, we have people going from door to door, vaccinating people at their homes, because people generally don't want to go to a hospital or to a clinic. They don't have a positive feeling of going to hospitals or clinics. So we have to meet people where they are, at the malls, at the taxi ranks, travel hubs, where people get taxis, where they travel at trains. We put up stations for vaccinations, at community halls. We have pop-up shops in different parts throughout the country. We have vaccination sites that we put up at food courts and restaurants where people go to eat. And then we also have vaccinations at universities. For example, UNISA, where I am, is giving free vaccinations to students, to staff, to anybody. So we are trying to get people where they are. We also have people doing vaccinations at recreational areas, for example, at parks. So we try and meet people where they are, because if you wait for them to go to a hospital, it's not really going to happen. We've also implemented the vaccination train. So we have a train that goes to all the rural areas where people generally stay far from cities and are removed from healthcare systems, so that the train can go and vaccinate people where they are, and we can meet as many of them as possible. Now, in terms of research, South Africa has been doing really a lot since the pandemic started. Now, we have identified 2 variants from the COVID-19 pandemic. That was Beta and now Omicron as well. Now, people generally wonder how we are able to identify all these vaccines and mutations and variants of the pandemic of COVID-19. And that really happens because we put a lot of resources and government funding into research and identifying new variants. So we've created a network of genome surveillance, which includes a linked network between all laboratories that does testing and do research, with all scientists and all academic institutions like universities that's got medical schools and do testing on variants. So they have a network and a database that's connected in real time. So they're doing research 24 hours a day as new information and tests come available. And then they detect new variants to see something is different in the tests being done on people that's got COVID-19. And this is heavily funded by government, because even before the pandemic, South Africa had a huge problem with HIV infections and TB, tuberculosis. So we have already been doing a lot of research on pandemics, for example, HIV and TB, even before the pandemic. So when COVID-19 started, a lot of these laboratories and scientists just switched over and they started doing COVID research. And research is important because it's not just with COVID. We have a population that has got pre-existing illnesses and diseases. So we've always focused a lot on funding research. But even if you look at the research being done, not just medically, but in public administration, in all different spheres related to COVID-19, if you look at the continent in a whole, South Africa has been doing the majority of the research. For example, in the past 2 years, the most publications related to COVID-19 on the continent came from the University of Cape Town, the University of Stellenbosch, Wits University in Johannesburg, the University of KwaZulu-Natal. The university that is 5th on the list for research on the continent is Makerere University in Uganda, and then it's the University of Pretoria and South Africa again. So we are putting a lot of emphasis on doing research on COVID-19, not just on the medical part, but also on policy, how it influences the different spheres of government, all these aspects. Now, then we come to the Omicron fallout. So what happened was, before the new.
I hate to say this, but you have only 1 minute left.
Oh, I'll rush quickly. So before the Omicron variant, we had about 200 infections a day. Now we've about 10,000 a day, but we still have low admissions for hospitals. So as soon as the news broke about the new Omicron, everybody started putting travel bans against South Africa, and all our flights got cancelled, especially from the US, UK, and the European Union. This was very bad for us, our economy, and we're going into the tourism season. However, if you look at India, they said, we'll just do more testing on arrival for South Africans. So what has happened with Omicron is that it has really showed us specifically the deepening divide between the East and the West, the rich nations and the poor nations, the developed world and the developing world, those that have and those that have not. We're seeing this divide coming in more clearly because countries are very quickly to implement a travel ban against South Africa that's got the new variant. But if you have the new variant, as you have them in the Netherlands and Belgium and in other countries, they don't get travel bans. So there's a difference between having Omicron in South Africa and having it in the Netherlands, for example. And then if you look at the future for South Africa and the future for public administration, we believe that we have to look at our alliances and we have to look at our partnerships, for example, with our BRICS countries and with the European Union, because these are the countries that has been supporting us throughout the pandemic. And these are the countries that we were able to rely on during the pandemic. So our focus going forward needs to be on those countries that is supporting us, that we support, and that does not alienate us during our times of having a new wave, a fourth wave, or a new pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. By the way, there's a lot of hope, at least here in Russia, that the Omicron variant, which is supposedly again, more contagious but less fatal than the previous variants are, will replace the Delta variant, and therefore stop the pandemic. So it will be like regular flu or something like that. Yes. So maybe the salvation will come from South Africa. Who knows?
I hope so. But the bad thing at this point is, you know, as soon as we identified the new variant, travel restrictions was placed on South Africa, but all our neighboring countries as well. So Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, all these countries. So at this point, we're not very popular because we did the research and we identified the variant.
Yeah,
and everybody gets banned. So
it's a psychological effect more than a psychological thing, rather than a rational response. We'll have a whole section on social and psychological aspects of the pandemic following this one. Okay, thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you.
And I'm giving the floor to Professor Martin Gellin from University of Public Service in Hungary. So, Professor Gellin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Do you hear me, Professor?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. And do you see my presentation?
Yes,
we can see it.
Oh, great. Thank you. So I understand that I have only 7 minutes, or perhaps even less.
No, so 7 is fine. 7 is fine.
Let's go at it. Okay, I formulated a little research question, and this is an ongoing research. The first part of this research has been already published in Вопросы. Do you know this journal of the Higher School of Economics? So, but still, the research material is much more. So who knows? Perhaps I can publish this at one of your journals. So how does COVID-19 response intensify already existing debate between the EU and some of its members. Of course, some of its members is Poland and Hungary. And I thought that I would break down this complex question to 3 sub-questions. Number 1, context of democratization by transaction. So this is a very long school of thought. So I went back in time to the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, the good old Cold War times, when this democratization by transaction theory was developed. The meaning of this is basically that I am very democratic. Yeah.
Martin, sorry, your presentation is not changing, so we see only the first slide.
Oh, I am already at slide number 3. Okay, well, what can we do?
I think you should restart it once again.
I shall restart.
Maybe hit the full screen.
I exit full screen mode and then.
No, now it's working. It's okay.
Now it's okay.
Working.
It's not in the full screen mode, but it's
no,
okay. Yeah.
No full screen mode, but anyhow, okay. So here you see Dankwart Rustov's name is one of the most decisive in this field, but also a very big name, Samuel B. Huntington, who said that the best way to democratize the other parts of the world is to give some more funding to the American military. This is in his writing, so you can find the citation in the paper I referred to. And this is a long train of thought. I do not have the time to delve into the nitty-gritties, but there is another part of theory regarding the background or the factors that bring about democracy in a country, and this is the organic contextual theory, where I listed a couple of very, very big names who are on this side. Unfortunately to us, when the EU started to be a democratizer, it took the former position. So it's a one-sided transactional approach. And this is very much present in contemporary theory, but also in practice. So let's get to practice. If you categorize the underlying factors why the EU thinks it has the right to democratize one or two or many of other countries, including its own members, you find 3 basic groups of reasons. Number 1 is the positivistic reason. You signed up for this, so you have to take it. Okay. Number 2 is, oh, the EU would fall apart if it didn't uphold its values against you. Okay. And number 3 is, we will discipline you for a greater good. Now, this greater good thing sounds maybe very familiar for those who used to be citizens of the Soviet regime, because, of course, everything was done in the name of a greater good. Also in the People's Republic of Hungary. And recently, new legal tools were developed to do this, to perform this discipline, namely Article 7 of the Treaty of the European Union. And under this article, the European establishment, the European Parliament, working together with the Council and the Commission, has the right to discipline its own member states, and it has many rights. Under this article, one of these rights is to take away subsidies and deprive you from your voting right in the name of the great democracy. And here is the list of those values that ought to be protected. Okay, so we have a train of thought that goes along the decades of the Cold War, saying that I have the right to democratize you because I am more democratic than you are. Number two, the EU took this position. And here we are, number three, further escalation of tensions, economic crisis, migration crisis, and the pandemic. So I think that tensions already began to emerge at one of those previous crises, namely the economic crisis between 2000 and 2012. Well, countries differ on this, but I present the Hungarian experience. And then these escalations went up to a further level in 2015, August, September 2015, when on a good day, there were 10,000 new arrivals on the Hungarian border. So even by Russian terms, I would say the 10,000 people a day would mean a lot. Now, in case of a small country, you can imagine this. So immediately the government reacted that time, and this provoked this certain sense of being isolated within the EU. And then the pandemic. And I am lucky that Kitty Polak presented all the legal nitty-gritties of what happened throughout the pandemic control and all the new legal materials that were introduced. So I jumped to the conclusion. And I don't know whether you have this writing on Russian police cars to serve and to protect. Now we do. And do you?
No,
yeah, perhaps.
no, not really.
No.
No.
But we do. And this reflects very much the duality of the state. So when it serves you, it might be very democratic, but when it protects you, then it is rather undemocratic towards the culprits. But when the state protects somebody against you or against me, it can be very harsh sometimes. And this is a natural state of affairs. So the state has two sides like a coin, I would say. And these contingency policies provoke the European Union to act as a democratizer because of many reasons, and or many alleged reasons, I would say, many pretexts, saying, for example, that Russian and Chinese vaccines are non-democratic vaccines. Or you are a dictatorship because you have these. And secondarily, there was an emergency regulation installed by the government without a time limit, but later on it was limited in time, and the parliament voted to get it back. And still, it was proven by our European colleagues that it is undemocratic. Okay, so this goes back to many internal ambiguities within Article 7 itself, and one is the nature of rule of law that is not clearly defined, because there are two approaches of rule of law, and Hungary, same as most of Central Europe, I would say, is a Rechtsstaat country, which is slightly
One minute.
yeah, which is slightly different. In a Rechtsstaat country, you entitle the state to do good and to pursue truth, which is different from a rule of law country where usually analogical legal reasoning is paramount. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you,
thank you.
Professor Martin Gelin, for your very interesting remarks, which might spark the whole discussion. Thank you. Our last presenter in the first session of our today's roundtable discussion is Dr. Peter Kornvári, also from University of Public Service in Hungary. Dr.
Okay, thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Let's do it again. My problem is with presenting. I don't think you see anything now.
Not yet.
Okay. Share the screen, basic, desktop 1. Share. And now
we see it, yeah.
Okay, this is what I should have told you, and I will share my personal notes too, because I am sure it would be too long for the time being. And this is the presentation. Tell me, please, if it's functioning.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right, great. Ladies and gentlemen, дорогие друзья, I am really very happy to be here, and I swear I had no idea what the others would talk about. So if my thoughts are seemingly a reaction to your ideas, no, it's just mere sheer brainstorming. I would like to talk about post-pandemia, a non-existing term, so it will be very free, in fact, and I break all the rules of presenting, so don't be surprised if my notes I share with you and the presentation slides are pretty surreal. Now, where are we now? We are now in a situation where we mix up post-pandemic with post-COVID-19, post-COVID whatever, post-respiratory pandemic, whatever. And we don't really see where the line ends, because there will be, I'm sure, pandemic-like medical issues globally after we solve the problems of respiratory illnesses. This is because it is, in fact, what we experience, a biological attack on the fortress of our bodies. This biological attack is due to the biological change, the ecological change that is essentially interrelated with the geological changes we experience. But when we talk about post-COVID and post-pandemic, we do the same problem, we do the same mistake as when simplifying the geological changes and their effects to CO2 emissions. So it's a problem of myopia, it's a problem of short-sightedness, it's a problem of short time horizons used when we are thinking. All of these are symptoms, symptoms that will seemingly lead to negative outcomes unless we do something. And I mean by this to widen our horizons and broaden our and make our thoughts more colorful and changing, because there are other changes present too. So it's not only biological, it's not only geological, it's technological, it's economic, it's social, it's political. We have a large number of systems of change going on parallelly, interrelated to each other, and all are leading to a global disaster. Hooray, we are facing massive losses in lives and assets. This is what we're calling disaster management, a crisis context. It's quite clear picture, and we don't see the causes. So solution can be offered to the symptoms right now, but to identify the causes would be not without any advantage for us. All we can do is to hope that we find ways to change at least those systems of developments that we have an effect on. And if we have only a partial effect or no effect on ecological and geological change, so we have to think over what we can do in terms of technological, economic, social, and political changes and others, to use them and drive them towards preparation and prevention to win time, to build our barricades, to focus our efforts on avoiding the crisis or to mildening their effect. What can we do? We should probably have a look at management sciences and the changes in human thinking for a bit. In the time of modernism, 18th and 19th century, up to 1900s and up to practically the Second World War, I would say, our systems, our organizations, our states were led and managed, and decision-making was done by the few educated, by the few who were in picture, by the few who had the knowledge to do that, if we were lucky, of course. All the rest in a business company, in the mines, in the states, all the rest of the population had to be taught what to do. Most of the population were uneducated, barely able to write their own names under the sun, if at all. And they had to be organized to do some simple work towards a simple objective in a relatively simple local organization or state or any part of it. So there were few people who were able to decide. If we compare the situation with the present one, in the post-chaos theory age, in the post-IT age, in the post-modern age, in the 21st century, we see that those who are in picture, those who have the knowledge about the problems and the situations and the way to solve them are on the bottom of our organization. They are the specialists. They are those who know what to do if a problem appears, or they have the chance to co-act with others and find the right solution. The further you are up in the organization, the least you know about the problem itself. And the more outdated your knowledge might be about what the organization actually does where the problem appears. So the Japanese are absolutely right when they state in lean management that decisions should be done on the shop floor, not up in the organization headquarters. Now, highly educated populations are managed in our states nowadays. So we don't have to do what we had to do in those old days of 1900s, with the exception of some countries in the periphery, of course, and in some population groups in our countries. We don't have to teach workers what to do on the job because they bring it from school. They have to be explained it and they take over. Managers don't have to train and retrain from task to task everybody. And we don't need those high hierarchies to lead the worker step by step from an unskilled to a semi-skilled to a skilled worker status up to a technician status or a manager status, because they are educated to take over at higher levels. So the world itself becomes much more complicated. people are much more educated. Organizations do much more complicated things. We have much more complicated and complex problems. So one person cannot have enough in their heads. Top managers are far away from the problems. Whether we speak about a business organization or a state, they cannot see the solution. The primary rule I would suggest in the postmodern age, in the 21st century, in modern states, is never do what others can do better than you. And what better means under different contexts can be different things, of course. The most important problem we make is not centralize or decentralize, but what we use centralization and what we use decentralization for. Whenever we do something that others know better, then we make a mistake. We have no time to. Yes, sir. We have no time to make mistakes because we are running out of time if we use the old types of organization. And what do we need times for? We need times to find out how to survive in the coming era, above or under the ice, above or under the water, above or under the earth. How to manufacture breathable air because we will run out of it. How to manufacture drinkable water because we will run out of it. How to manufacture food. We will have no roads. How to move globally. How to maintain movements and transportation without filling stations, how to do it without existing electric networks of the traditional type, how to survive and save our civilization in the post-pandemia we are building right now. And the solution is in management to facilitate and facilitate and facilitate. Laissez-nous faire. Let us do it. You know the outcry of the sea merchants in France against the mercantilist attack from the state. Do what you know the best and facilitate those who know it better than you. That's the message of the COVID crisis for me, and I think we will grow out of COVID crisis with success is if we build a post-pandemia that offers us chances to global survival. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kornwari. So we've come to an end of the first block of presentations, first set of presentations. And let's have a very brief question and answer session. So please, if you want to ask any question, please indicate who you want to address this question to. So Professor Kornwari, would you please close your
I would like to close everything, but I don't know yet. Oh, I see. Stop sharing. That's much better. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Dear participants, please questions to our first presenters, first group of presenters.
May I ask one question to Professor Yarswell, to Lisa? So Lisa, during your presentation, you have mentioned that there was a big support from BRICS countries to South Africa. Would you give some details what were done?
Thank you, Tatiana. Yes, what we saw with the BRICS countries was that the ministers, the different health ministers from the different BRICS countries has had collaborative meetings. They've done this quite a few times. During the past weekend, we also had a discussion with the health minister of China. We also saw that, for example, India has been very supportive, while other countries put in travel bans to South Africa. And we also saw that in terms of China, they were also willing to share knowledge, resources, information. So the BRICS countries has been a lot more forthcoming. And I think a lot of that stems from Brazil receiving a lot of criticism and a lot of bad feedback for their handling of the pandemic. So did South Africa, so did India during their second wave, so did China when the pandemic started with them. So I think for example, South Africa, you know, that is the route that we should be taking, and seeing how these BRICS countries, for example, can come out stronger after the pandemic than what we were before the pandemic. I read some articles that also indicated that COVID has hit the BRICS system very badly, and that everybody is focusing so much on COVID that we're neglecting BRICS. But I don't think that is the case, because I've seen a lot of support between the health systems from the different BRICS countries. And I think there's a real opportunity economically and administratively as well for these countries to work together to come out stronger after the pandemic, and to collaborate and build on the BRICS systems and aspects that we already had in place before the pandemic.
Thank you, Lisa. I have a question actually to Dr. Andrushina. You mentioned the very, very important issue of trust in authorities. Well, it's a common notion that trust is about social capital, right? And social capital, it's something that makes societies resilient to crises, at least in theory. For instance, they make societies more economically sustainable, according to Putnam, for instance. What did this crisis, the current crisis, show us in terms of social capital? Is there any connection between how societies react and how they move along the way of recovery and the issue of trust? Is there a correlation between the less trust, less resilience, less ability to recover, or no?
Thank you for your question, dear Alexander Yakovlevich. You know, there is no just one answer, because it seems to me that it depends on the country, it depends on the civilization, and it depends on the type of a ruling regime. Because in my report, I mentioned that if we compare the results of recovery within and after the COVID-19 in, for example, the United States, in European countries, in comparison to the Asian countries, the last countries showed the best result. So you know that maybe the question of trust between political elite and society, civil society, was very crucial in terms of democratic regimes, because you know, when there are many ways of empowerment, and there are strong traditions of democratic involvement of different social groups in politics, in policy-making process, in politics and in public policy, I mean. So it was a very hard trial for modern democracies in terms of pandemic to save the strong communication between elite and non-elites. And every kind of infringement of civil rights and freedoms, they were taken very hard and harsh by civil population, civil society. And that is why, for example, many democratic countries, Israel, modern Israel, they pushed Israel citizens to be vaccinated, and it is must-have. So, and there is no, yes, it is possible to highlight some protests and so on and so forth, but a state is very strong in terms of crisis. When we speak about the traditional values, traditional collectivism values in political culture, it is easier to get a strong state who is responsible for the recovery, the best practices of recovery. And yes, it is possible to identify some correlations, direct correlations or indirect correlations between the trust and the state. Yes, it was a trial. It was a trial. And if we compare just ordinary opinions, they are very different, because I've got many students from different parts of the world. And for example, Chinese people, Japanese people, they are proud of their states, and they are happy with their measures, which were taken by their governments in terms of pandemic. But it seems to me that those measures were very strict and harsh and undemocratic, but they helped to solve the problem of pandemic. And it was different in comparison for the democratic regimes. And for example, many German, American, French students, they are not happy with all the lockdowns in their countries, and all the types of support from government to small business to families and so on and so forth, they are not estimated as effective and efficient, you know.
Thank you.
That's my position. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I have one more question from me to Professor Gellin, and maybe some other participants from Hungary. Professor Gellin, you had a quote from my friend, actually, Mitchell Orenstein, about transnational actors and the role of transnational actors during this time of crisis. Do you think this role changes, or is this role getting more destructive or constructive during this time of crisis, at least given European Union experience and Hungary's experience?
You mean the role of transnational
actors,
international actors?
Transnational actors. It's actually a question about sovereignty.
Yes, I have a quick response. Of course, this can be understood as a wide research question for the future, but I have a quick response, namely that in crisis control, always the field commander has an advantage. Okay, so wherever there is a fire outbreak or a military situation or whatever, the field commander knows all. And in a comparison between the member states and transnational actors, the nation states are the field commanders, so they have a positional advantage.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think it's time for us to move further and to...
There is another question, Alexander Lishin, Professor Lishin. There's a question from Laszlo.
Professor Laszlo, please. Well, listening to your question. Okay.
Thank you. I will be very quick and brief. I think when it comes to effective state and government, it is evident, it is crucial that whether the state itself can provide and ensure the adequate access to information in terms of providing public health services and access to act properly. And when looking at the market developments, and we know that the IT company, the largest IT companies, tend to buy out or purchase health companies in general, and these companies can provide access information to their own health companies, in leading to a kind of oligopolistic or monopolistic situation in market. And the basic question is that what kind of strategy should be followed to protect citizens and to make available vaccines for the entire population in order to cope with the pandemic. So I think it would be a very important question for future discussion and formulating better strategies around the world.
Right, right. Thank you so much. So we are moving to the second part of our today's discussion, which is focusing on social and socio-psychological aspects of the crisis, as well as on the variety of responses in this particular area. And our first next speaker will be Professor Zhao Rong from University of Electronic Science and Technology of China. I need to say that Professor Zhao Rong is one of the leaders of public administration studies and public policy studies in China in general, since their School of Public Policy is one of the leading schools of public policy in China. Professor Zhao Rong, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Professor. And dear colleagues, I should say evening greetings from China now. And I know time is too short, but anyhow, and also I want to express my sincere thanks to Professor Alexander Levshia and his colleagues from the International Office from the School of Public Administration, Moscow State University. And my topic today is post-pandemic village revitalization in China, challenges and also opportunities. My presentation will mostly focus on how to effectively promote the strategy of Chinese rural revitalization in revitalizations. So first of all, concerning the challenges, two aspects, psychologically and also economically. So we all know the impact of epidemic on human psychology is greater than that of body, and the person-to-person transmissions of virus have increased people's anxiety and fear, especially in rural areas where supplies are even more scarce. So they have limited ways to resolve anxiety. So the problem for the psychological trauma and also the panic mentality has increased the burden for the rural governance in China. This is a new challenge for us. Secondly, from the economically perspective, we have highlighted three points. First of all, the circulation of agricultural products is actually blocked. So controlled transportation, for example, has resulted in unsellable agricultural products and overstocked agricultural products with insufficient storage space and with frustrated agricultural market. This is another challenge, economically speaking, and also for the labor forces. And in rural areas, so many migrant workers, we call it as a parent migrant workers. By our statistics, by the end of 2020, we have 285.6 million migrant workers from the rural areas. So for them, how can we provide jobs locally or in the rural areas? So that's another challenge. And the third challenge, economically speaking, that's for the rural service industry has been hard hit. And we know rural tourism is a very important part for the promotion for the rural vitalization strategy in China. And not only for the rural tourism industry, but also the relevant industry such as rural catering industry also has been hit. So another challenge is how can we improve the rural tourism in China, and also what's a new type? That's another challenge. And the third challenge regarding to people's people's health. Now in rural areas in China, on the average per village, we only have more than 2 health workers working in the health room, and the huge gap in the rural areas in terms of medical resources, technology, and also the professionals. So this is another challenge for how the government can actually respond to the pandemic maternity problems caused. And now we have mentioned 3 challenges regarding the employment, agriculture, product selling, and also the people's mental health. And so how can we turn the challenges into what opportunities? So first of all, and the pandemic has forced a new agriculture on the internet. The emergence of e-commerce try to help farmers to sell their agricultural products. Now in China, we have the establishment with internet celebrity economy, and such as even for the village leader acting as a host, and also the county chief speaking for the hometown products, with the opening up the visibility of agricultural products, broadening sales channels, and also our e-business has also opened online anti-epidemic assistance, and also the feedback channel for unsellable agricultural products. So this can serve as a opportunity. Even the epidemic has forced a new agriculture on the internet. So another is regarding to our traditional rural tourism. How about a new type? And after pandemic, people are more willing to go to rural tourism to experience rural life, and also even for certainly there. And this also give us some opportunity to have more relevant industries developed, and also for some more rich natural resources, tourist resources to be explored. So in order to responding for the unemployment, and also for the agricultural product selling, and now this leading to a new concept for construction of a rural industrial parks. This has become a trend in China. So through the models of a company plus farmers, and also the company plus rural base and farmers, we have the formation of rural industrial parks and the creation of a rural industry chain. And this is different from what we used to have, the traditional industrial parks. So this may become a new trend and also new opportunity to promote rural vitalization strategies. And so, and for the countermeasures and suggestions, we have 2 countermeasures or suggestions. So talent support, this is also a new trend for because for the modernization of agriculture, prosperity of rural industries, and the rural governance needs talent. There is a huge gap in our rural areas. So another support is another suggestion is for the financial support, and the financial institutions at the different levels should serve the function with the aid from the favorable public policy issued from the government to deliver financial water for rural vitalization, agriculture, and rural development. Because only 7 minutes, I have to conclude here. I think that's exactly 7 minutes. Thank you. And
thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Zhao Shurong. Our next speaker, we'll have 2 speakers from Qatar University. And the first speaker from Qatar University is Dr. Larry Noura. Dr. Noura. Oh, she is here with us.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Alexander. Thank you for the introduction. Let me share my presentation. Do you see it? Is it on?
Not yet. Not
Yeah.
yet.
What about now?
Now we can see it. Now we can
Right.
see it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alexander. My name is Dr. Noura Lari. I'm an assistant research professor at the Social and Economic Survey Research Institute and the manager of the policy department at the Research Institute. On behalf of the director of the Institute, we would like to thank you all, and especially thanks to Dr. Titania for her invitation to participate in this event. We are very happy for you to host us here. We consider this participation as a part of our valued MOU that has been signed between the two universities, and we hope to exchange more information and experience from our side and from your side as well. So let me introduce you to the topic that I'm going to share with you today. So basically, we have my colleague and I. So with the following presentation, will be presenting a paper which was recently published about the psychological impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in Qatar. While in my speech, I will be focusing more on giving you an overview of the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic in Qatar and the Qatar government responses and to these impacts, and also the impacts of this COVID-19 crisis on the survey research operation within our institute. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share with you the Qatar government COVID-19 responses and the situation basically in Qatar. There had been around 200,000 and 44,000 infection and 611 coronavirus related deaths reported since the pandemic in Qatar has began. COVID-19 infection are currently increasing with around 156 new infection reported on average each day. However, the Ministry of Public Health in Qatar has implemented a successful national strategy for vaccination against COVID-19, which consisted of 4 phases over the course of 2022. And as you all know, Qatar COVID-19 response has been widely praised in the region and globally for its protective measures, quarantine policies, and also its vaccination program. So far for the national COVID-19 vaccination program, efforts has been focused on vaccinated our most at-risk population, especially the elderly and those with severe chronic conditions, healthcare worker, frontline workers, and other essential workers within the workforce. Quoting Dr. Ahmed Al-Mandari, who is the director of the World Health Organization, director for the Eastern Mediterranean, he basically praised the status of healthcare system in Qatar and the way the crisis has been successfully handled with the COVID-19 situation. Qatar has very advanced and established health system and provide high quality healthcare services to its population. Some of the effective measures that have been implemented to protect individual and the public property were as follows. This is a brief brief introduction or brief overview of how Qatar has handled the impacts of COVID-19. So in terms of COVID-19 tests, it was mandatory for all passengers at airports. So, and everyone was required to wear a face mask. University and schools restored to instruction online. And of course, there were specialized medical cadres of doctors and nurses, and there were advanced facilities with the latest laboratory devices and equipment seated like at hospitals. There were also like temporary COVID-19 field hospital, temporary vaccination center, and also like a vaccine drive-through stations that has been set up. These additional like vaccine center were put there like in order like to enable the healthcare worker in order to increase the capacity to the vaccinated population and open the opportunity also like for the general public to be vaccinated. There was like an ihtiraz application, what we call it, which was implemented and downloaded for mobile phone, which was mandatory also like by government in order to check the health status and vaccination doses that has been given like to each individual. The media sector in Qatar also like has done like a great job in informing people about the picture of the spread of the virus. So for example, this is like a report or the daily reports that has been established, and this is like a screenshot that was taken from the daily report established by the Ministry of Public Health in Qatar, where it has specifically present the total number of current active cases, for instance, or total number of recovered cases to date. And it is like this report like is updated like on regular basis. As soon as September 2021, the Ministry of Public Health has announced the availability of the COVID-19 vaccine booster doses that were available also like for the public. For now, they urge everyone who is at high risk or over the age of 60 to register, like to take or to have an appointment in order to have the booster dose vaccination. As you know, all of these like policy mandate, like state mandated policies, and also all the preventive measures in the country cannot like be that successful without public awareness, public compliance with these measures. And so as a research institute, like the Social and Economic Survey Research Institute here in Qatar have done like conducted several studies in order to explore the public awareness attitude toward COVID-19 in order to help the government and the health sector implement policies in order to control the spread of the virus. So just like by way of illustration, CISRI is an internationally recognized center for scientific public opinion research. Topics of research or projects spans theoretical, empirical, and also practical questions in the field of social science. We use original survey data collected in order to inform the public debate and also like decision making on the topics that are related like to the impacts of this pandemic. We also work like on a range of other topics, and we usually like use survey design. We have the sample selection, we do the data entry, cleaning, encoding, and also like the analysis of the data. And at the end of the day, like we produce reports shared like with the government. As you all know, there were like some impacts on the survey research operation. And here I would like to emphasize the support that we were giving from like Qatar University and the government in order to increase or to at least like minimize the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on the survey operation itself. So the field of survey-based research is experiencing rapid growth through a series of innovations in theory, method and technologies for data collection. As you can imagine, these challenges have also inspired methodological innovation and the survey research capacity within our institute. Although like the pandemic has placed like enormous strain on survey research operation within the categories of methodology, data collection procedures, and also the number of studies that we usually conduct like per year, CISRI have managed like to have trained interviews that collect several research studies during the pandemic using social distancing protocol in the call center, or also like through the remote interviewing system developed by CISRI Information Technology Unit. So we have shifted most of our studies from face-to-face, which was like couldn't like be implemented face-to-face, and we shifted this like to CATI lab, which is like a telephonic based lab, and also we have shifted most of our studies like to web survey. Part of this effort, there was like a Qatar University emergency response grant that my team and I have applied to, and part of this grant, the main outcome of this grant came as a published paper measuring the psychological impacts on the population, Qatari citizen, and also like the residents here in Qatar. My colleague Miriam, which is like in the following presentation, will be giving you like details about the project, how we implement, how we implemented, and also like the result of the project will be also discussed later on. I have reached like the end of my presentation. I will be giving the floor like to Miriam in order to continue discussion of the result of our paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Noura Lari. And Mariam Al-Thani, so you were announced already, so please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me and the sound is clear.
Mm-hmm. We can hear you well.
So as my colleague Dr. Noura mentioned, that we applied for this grant and we managed to get the grant. So we decided to focus on the psychological distress during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this study was done like during the first phase of the pandemic. So like middle of 2020, the year of 2020. So our goal from this study was to, generate knowledge about the direct and indirect effect of several factors influencing the psychological distress caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. We used a large-scale web survey placed in social media websites. So we advertised through social media. And we looked at factors. This is just a graph about the like worldwide anxiety during 2020. So we, from the literature, we reviewed several factors that might have an effect on or a relation to psychological distress, which were age, gender, using blended learning, teleworking. This is, of course, part of governmental strategies. Public knowledge about COVID-19, perceived seriousness of COVID-19, social stigma surrounding COVID-19 and getting COVID-19, and then the strategic response to the crisis, so by the government mainly. And then the adherence to the COVID-19 preventative measures. So these are the factors that we looked at. The survey instrument was based on a validated tool that was used during the SARS outbreak to measure the anxiety at that time. And the population was almost 5,000, and we managed to get 1,683 validated responses. So people who like fully finished the survey. The demographics, mainly we had more females than males. And then people in the study mostly rated their health as either good or excellent. So we had only 1.9% rate their health as poor, which is worth mentioning. So we used the exploratory factor analysis as a data reduction technique to establish the construct validity of the questions. So we had 8 extracted dimensions, which were teleworking challenges, strategic response to the crisis, social stigma, adherence to COVID-19, preventative measures, social distress, knowledge of COVID-19, blended learning, and perceived seriousness. As you can see here in the regression analysis, the variables showed to be significant. We also used, of course, age and gender. So the factors increasing the likelihood of psychological distress were the teleworking, the adherence to COVID-19, the blended learning, strategic response, social stigma, perceived seriousness, and knowledge of COVID-19 showed to decrease the psychological distress. So the more people had factual information about either the measures or the like COVID itself, their anxiety was lower. So the relationship with age was very weak. In terms of gender, women experienced higher level of mental distress. So this might be in relation to the load that women had to carry during that time. Blended learning. So blended learning increased the likelihood of psychological distress. Women were more likely to be distressed by that and preferred for students to go to school, which ties into the role of mothers and their role as the main caregivers. Expertise in Qatar preferred students to attend school compared to Qatari nationals, and this might have to do with like lack of help. Teleworking increased the likelihood of psychological distress, so women were facing more challenges in that sense also because teleworking and blended learning together was just a bigger challenge for women especially. And higher percentage of Qataris were fine with remote working, while expats preferred to go to work physically, and it might have to do with the fact that they feared like losing their jobs. Public knowledge about COVID-19 decreased the likelihood of psychological distress, as I mentioned previously. So the more people knew, the less they were anxious about it. Perceived seriousness of COVID-19 increased. So when people perceive COVID-19 as a very serious pandemic, then their anxiety levels were higher. Women had a bit higher perceived seriousness, but it's not statistically significant. Qatari citizens viewed COVID as less serious than expertise. Social stigma, greater stigmatizing by females, which again could be explained by the greater responsibilities. And there was no statistically significant difference between Qataris and expat perception on the reintegration of COVID-19 sufferers in Qatar. Finally, the strategic response to the crisis increased the likelihood of distress. So men were more likely to evaluate the stress reaction as being extreme as opposed to women. But in terms of like comparing it between Qataris and expats, they mostly evaluated the state reaction to be appropriate. Adherence to the COVID-19 measures increased the likelihood of psychological distress, although the adherence was lower among men than women, but the statistical difference was not that significant. Qatari citizens report substantially lower level of adherence to social restriction, especially limit to social gatherings, compared to non-citizens. So in terms of social gatherings, which was a huge part of the preventative measures, it showed that expats were more adherent to that aspect. So we came up with implications on the macro level and on the micro level. In terms of the micro level and on the macro level, psychological well-being obviously should be a priority. Sharing accurate information coming from accurate sources helped, debunk the conspiracy theories around the disease itself. Increase in investment in technology regarding teleworking and blended learning to make the process smoother. Place more attention on psychological impacts of COVID-19 and provide emotional support and communication around COVID. So what Qatar did was provide a hotline that people can call in regarding their, if they're feeling anxious or need mental help. On the micro level, adapting workplace policies to promote mental health and train employees to adapt new environment and cope with challenges, providing flexible arrangements for employees, especially parents who had their kids in blended learning, engage more in corporate social responsibility initiatives, and schools to conduct ongoing check-in to monitor how families were coping. So for more information, you can contact us to provide the publication that we came up with. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Mariam. I think it's a very interesting research. We'll probably have a chance to discuss a little later. And our final presenter in this section is Professor Thierry Fortin from Sciences Po Lyon, which is a partner institution for our school. And Thierry is a good friend of our school. Good to see you, Thierry. The floor is yours.
So I think everybody can hear me. Is that okay? Oh,
Yes,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexander, for this invitation. I'm really glad to contribute. It's good to see that in spite of the various lockdowns and the difficult situations when borders were closed again, we can still cooperate worldwide, all continents being represented, and it's probably one of the best lessons learned of this crisis, this ongoing
Except
crisis.
of America. Time difference wouldn't allow us.
That's it. Yeah, we won't change that. There are irreducible differences, but nevertheless, we can, thanks to modern technology, we can still communicate. So I'm going to share my screen and probably, yeah, let's go. You will tell me if you can see it. Probably you can see it now.
Yes.
Very good. So it works perfectly well. Good. So I'm going to present a snapshot during 7 minutes, which is a challenge. That's the first challenge is the limited time frame. The resilience of France's higher education system facing COVID-19, which was a never before seen crisis for us. So here's a quick outline. We'll give you a few facts and figures to replace everything in context. And I will do something which is probably more operation oriented and just trying to evaluate what was done and see the lessons learned. Probably my I would say defense and security background played a part in that, in this orientation probably. And I will draw conclusions related to the potential for upgrades, if not upheavals, in the higher education system to increase resilience and also improve all the teaching processes and learning processes. So I will give the vision. Although I'm a defense, security, international expert, I was the director of international relations in my institution. Sciences Po Lyon is a small, very selective grande école which is in size, it's equivalent to an American college. It's 1,800 students, more than 400 staff. So you see the student to teacher ratio, which is absolutely, that's luxurious. That's something that the rest of, and it will also explain why we overperform compared to other standard universities with massive participation, with 20,000 students, and then of course a more separate, more compartmented functioning in terms of the management of the organization. So I will give my vision of a long-term insider in this Grande École connected, and we are connected with hundreds of French and worldwide universities. So a few facts and figures concerning higher education in France. 3,500 higher education institutions of all types, technical, medical, humanities, just top down and also scattered all over the territory. We don't have the problem that other countries have with the scattering of universities, of institutions, like a country like Russia or Australia, or we are, that's more compact, but basically we have a lot of institutions to deal with at the same time, with 1.65 million students. And what aggravated the problem, more than 300,000 international students from all over the world who were blocked during the first lockdown with limited livelihoods, I would say, because everything was closed, they were far away from their families, and it obviously aggravated the issue. So the challenge is, various institutions of different sizes and fundings. We have this motto for the French Republic, liberté, égalité, fraternité, and equality is something that's a DNA of the French Republic. Literally, it's a religion. But you know, there's the legal country and the real country, and in the real country you have disparities in funding of different institutions. My institution, for example, is sort of a wealthy parent of the system, and they are the big standard universities with less selection or no selection, because usually you have a direct transfer somehow between high school students and a higher education system. For the non-selective system, they are obviously underfunded. They are going through a public funding crisis, like the hospitals, something which materialized, the awareness materialized throughout the COVID crisis, because we found that we had an insufficient number of beds available. And that's always in times of crisis that you see that. When you have no wars, when you have no problems, everything is okay. But when you see that you're underfunded your public services and you have a big issue coming, everybody just turns to the decision makers and just says, what have you been doing over the past decade? So that's this disparity of capacities and staff in the different universities played a big part in the various responses. Distance isolation, that's a characteristic of higher education students. They're very often far away from their families. All the more so since we also have overseas territory students coming to France from the West Indies, from Reunion Islands, in the Indian Ocean, and also people from Polynesia sometimes. So they are very far away from their families. So it poses problems of the logistical problems that people have when they are isolated somewhere. It can be tourists in a, I don't know, a storm, a tropical storm in the West Indies, or it can be people trapped in next to their embassy during terrorist crisis or wars. So accommodation was the first problem, and the limited space for the students in their halls of residence, nutrition, healthcare, and of course, all this triggering off serious psychological issues. My Qatari colleague spoke about that. They doubled, the anxiety and depression rates doubled throughout this period. All the more so since for teenagers, being blocked like lions in a cage was absolutely unbearable. All the more so since the number of square meters available for each of them was really, really limited. A lot of numerous students came from all over the world. We had to advise them what different languages, different situations, different doctoral students, you had bachelor, master students, and so on. And Sciences Po, my institution, was absolutely involved in that, because we have, out of the 1,800 students we had 300 incoming students every year. Let's say extremely internationalized, given the small size of the institutions. And the other problem was the number of French students were out. They were blocked out of France, including some very, I would say, restricted regulations area in the Pacific, in the Americas, and so they couldn't come back. They had difficulty. So we had to negotiate with the academic partners and as well as with the diplomatic corps in these countries, because it was very difficult to find a flight with the closure of some airports to get them back to France. Right? It was really a matter of life, or I would say physical problems. I wouldn't say death necessarily, but physical problems. So the backup response was multiple fold by universities with different, and I will assess the achievements and shortfalls. There were a lot of safety procedures enforced to be sure that the students could be protected from the pandemic first. And we switched to distance learning or hybrid teaching when it was possible. Some universities did better than others because they have a computerization rate which was much better than others, and they had limited staff, limited student numbers and maximum staff numbers. We granted specific financial aid. There was emergency packages released to help students who were blocked far away from their families, French and foreign. And we also enhanced the monitoring of the students to fight against isolation and depression, something that I evaluate. Maybe I'm biased because that's my institution, or you can be self-critical sometimes. Well, the French are very good at that, and but basically we did very well because we have the number of staff members involved and the team spirit, I would say the very high strong identity culture of my institution helped that. And we were a team. So basically, we were committed to helping the students, other staff members, and so on. And this team spirit helped to get closer and work shoulder to shoulder, which reduced isolation and the depression rates among our students. The state responded as well in a very French way. So the state is from Paris, top down. They released some. So third, there were big decisions to facilitate access to very cheap meals for students who were isolated, because we saw at the beginning of the first lockdown, so files of students waiting to get meals because everything was closed, and they were relying on the public services for that, and they were blocked in France or in the city far away from their families. So 5.5 million meals for €1. So the price decreased for each meal. The state guaranteed student loans were raised from €15,000 to €20,000. There was free psychological counseling and a lot of jobs and responsibilities created just to monitor the student, the cohorts of students more closely, right? To have an intermediate level of management, not to have sort of a pyramid type hierarchy with people at the top who don't know what's going on in the field, and people in the field who are completely lost, with a loss of awareness, between a loss of contact between the two. And there was an extra €10 million package for emergency cases released. Universities did that at their level. Right? So achievements. It was perfect demonstration. That's my tactical operational training that somehow speaks once again. But we are used to doing this in hospitals, in firefighters units, and so on. But in universities, it was not part of the academic culture in France. It was a different culture. And the usefulness of adapted and accurate contingency plans before the crisis was actually demonstrated with properly informed and trained staff, something that firms know when they have communication crisis, scandals, and so on. They immediately put the plans in place, and the quicker the reaction is, the less damage the problem causes. But this is something which was completely different from the academic culture in France, which is a culture of freedom. Somehow everybody does what they have to. They know how to complete their missions, but that's a philosopher approach, where you have your school of thought in your own church somehow, and you don't belong to a particular hierarchy, or you only speak to God somehow. But that's difficult when you have a crisis, because you need to have these connections between people to be sure you maintain cohesion and you can all converge towards the same objectives. There was outstanding adaptability of some small-sized institutions with quick computerization of the training, administrative work, individual monitoring of the students. It was, because those things were in place, and somehow we are used in small institutions like mine to having delegation of powers and delegation of management to the lower levels, which means that facing the problems at short distance, at short range, we can quickly adapt to the real situation and not implement the big decisions from Paris when they don't know exactly what's going on in the field, right? And part of the selective institutions in the culture of the selective institutions in France is this staff and student leaders associations culture, which is very widespread in Anglo-Saxon institutions, but not necessarily in France. Only the grandes écoles in France do that. The most prominent engineering schools, Sciences Po, École Normale Supérieure, somehow, so that you have small cohorts of students that are managed at a very short distance, and it means that people are not isolated. People know who to talk to. They have individual interlocutors. They have closer ties, just like a family somehow. And these anthropological characteristics somehow save a lot, right? Of a lot of pain, a lot of misery, and it helps a lot, right? It's not necessarily the academic culture in the large standard universities. When, as I said, the freedom and somehow the isolation was a double-edged sword. It's good when everything's going okay, you have freedom of action and so on, but when you need to be guided, when you need to be advised, well, that's when the network is very useful, and it's I would say cruelly missing. So the large standard institutions face difficulties to monitor the students because of the difference in the student staff ratio. That's 20 to 1. For us, it's 4 to 1. 4 to 1. That's just larger than the army, right? It's basically you have people everywhere who can deal with you, administrative, teaching, computer. We have dedicated teams for in the computer service to deal with the students who had connection issues and so on. They could have individualized training. That was absolutely outstanding. Lack of social cohesion before the crisis in some underprivileged areas was lethal because it aggravated isolation, and it explained the rise in depression, anxiety. And the lack of cohesion in some institutions, people playing for their own team, their own department, it's compartmentation of the different disciplines. That's hampered a strong convergent institutional response. And some institutions, that's what our politicians realized, that there were social disparities in spite of the big slogans and the big political postures. That's food for thought for the next presidential elections. The future candidates will have to reunite the country around a big common project in higher education because it's strategic. Some institutions suffered from under-computerization.
Thierry, I hate to say this, but we're running out of time. Yes.
Okay.
So if you could wrap it up briefly.
That's 1 minute, and that's it. Sorry. So that's an opportunity, in fact, to implement overhauls in higher education. That's upgrade the teaching, learning, and evaluation processes. We found we were just working, and we had been working on successful models, and finally we found out that we could do much better. Right? It's also an opportunity to increase integration, cohesion within student cohorts, French and mobility. Students, promote innovation as a standard posture and not only an exceptional procedure on that way every 20 years or something, and also reduce CO2 emissions, right, by turning some face-to-face events that are absolutely secondary, small meetings and so on, into remote mode events. Because with congested traffic we have in France, we have this problem with cars everywhere and congested traffic in the suburban areas of all cities. My city, Lyon, is particularly hit with that. So it could be a way of reaching this 2050 carbon neutrality objective that our politicians have set up for us. So here are my references. So the ministries, my vision, that was my personal vision as a French executive, but I took the data, the facts and figures from the official figures and official websites of the ministries. Thank you very much for your attention. Sorry for overshooting.
Thank you, Thierry. Actually, we have a few students from Sciences Po system this semester at our school, and hoping to get more next semester, including from Sciences Po Lyon.
Yeah.
So hopefully the situation with travel or, you know, communicating across the borders is not that gloomy, probably.
Yeah. Fortunately.
Okay, thank you so much. So we've finished the second section of our roundtable discussion today. So we have time. We don't have time actually, but maybe a very brief question answer session now. So please ask your questions. I have a question to our participants from Qatar. Thank you again for your very interesting presentation. And I was amazed to hear that women are in more psychological distress during times of crisis. And the data was from 2016, I guess, and that's probably from SARS crisis, probably. Right? Am I right or not?
Actually, the data is from now, like 2022.
Oh, really? I think it's at okay. Because it's interesting because we used to think that women are more resilient than men. They're stronger than men usually.
What I can say is that like psychological distress might be a bit different from resilience, but I think the distress was mainly coming from the load that all of a sudden women had all their kids, and you know, most especially Qatari families, like we have 4, 5, 6 kids in each family, so you have kids in different ages trying to like put them in their blended learning or online learning while trying to work. So I think that was the main source of distress for women.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions to this group of participants?
There's a question from Lisa.
Is there a question from Lisa? Lisa, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I quickly want to make one comment, and then I have a question for our colleague from France. We found in research in South Africa recently that in terms of women, their research publications went down dramatically since the lockdown and the pandemic started, because they've been taking over so many responsibilities in terms of housekeeping and caring for children and homeschooling that they're not doing research anymore and they're not publishing anymore. So I think that's one of the things that, you know, we can do research on as well as to look at, because a lot of the gains that female academics made over the years has been stopped when the pandemic started. So that was quite interesting research that I saw recently for us in South Africa. But I want to ask our colleague in France, we've realized that with a lot of universities putting their courses online and teaching virtually, that a lot of governments are not willing to give student visas anymore, because their perception is you can now study at our university in America or in Europe and you can do it virtually. So there's this tendency to stop students from traveling now and to attend training and courses internationally. Are you going to still keep on teaching virtually and online, or are you going to accept students to go to France and assist them with visas in the future? Because there seems to have been a change in world politics with regard to tuition and traveling for students.
Thierry, you need to turn
okay, sorry. I had just turned this off. Yeah, interesting question. That's basically we have to strike the right balance between what we do virtually and what we do face-to-face. because otherwise we sense that some governments could seize this opportunity to reduce the cost of funding for higher education, saying you can turn everything into a virtual and this is something we feared. And we expressed that when our director met the Undersecretary of State for Higher Education, saying that should be a force. Modern technology should be a force multiplier to give us the capacity to work in connection with other, to open the classroom to other areas, to other continents at the same time, something that was not possible before, but not transform, I would say, the didactic relationships and the colleague relationships into something which would be entirely virtual with no more contact. So we are particularly sensitive to that as well, right? I think we have to strike something that there are some events that could become virtual without any problem, but most of the education should remain face to face, maybe being refurbished in the amount of for example, the amount of students we have per teacher. For example, the standard universities in France have seminars with 40 students for one teacher, for example. At Sciences Po, we have something like 10 to 15. So you see, we had the capacity to say that's probably there's a reflection to be conducted around that. But of course, I do agree with you. We shouldn't completely, I would say, virtualize education. It would be a complete loss. Right? It would be that's lessons unlearned. It's not lessons learned otherwise.
I have two students in my class, French students from France, in my class now, and they came over to Moscow. And all the classes they get in Moscow, they attend in Moscow are online. But mine, the only class, they came over in Moscow and they study online. So my lecture, my class is the only offline class they attend while staying in Moscow. I was crazy situation, but. Anyways, they're having the first experience of dragging through Russian winter because we have a lot of snow already.
But this is why they have mobility programs. They have to get closer to the realities of the world anywhere they go, whether they go to Iran, Russia, Japan, or anywhere, or Colombia, or that's what they need. And that's that's exactly what they were looking for. Last year, I had 8 months without seeing a student. My courses are very internationalized. I have 60% of international students, and some of them were blocked in their countries, or some of them, the Indians, were blocked in London or in Paris, and they would attend my courses in distance mode. And so I was really happy to see them again, face to face, physically. And they were during the start of the year in September 2021, the integration module. It was the first students I had seen in 1 year, in 12 months. Right, that was very strange for me as well. So it's it's really great to have resumed that type of procedures.
Thank you. Okay, I think we should move further to our third block of issues, which will focus on labor market developments and the transformation of the employment sphere. And the first scholar to talk would be Professor Tatiana Zaitseva from our School of Public Administration, Moscow State University. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Well, dear colleagues, let me use once again this opportunity to thank you all for joining us for this very valuable and interesting event. And let me share with you my screen, and you will see details of my presentation now. I've prepared a very brief presentation. So my topic for today will be a new reality after COVID-19 challenges of remote work that we can see all over the world, not only in Russia, because I will use some international data for this. Okay, let me. Let us look at the picture. What new challenges occur all over the world when we talk about changes in working conditions, how organizations change their work, and they while moving changing to remote work framework. So, well, of course, we have at least these 5 main changes that occur: new equipment and software, new rules and limits, new types of working goals, new types of communication, and new types of management control. Well, for today's, for my presentation for today, I've chosen to talk about this 5th dimension. So what kind of new types of management control occur and are used nowadays by organizations? And namely, I will concentrate myself on the use of electronic monitoring systems that are now applied all over the world by organizations. And with the use of these new types of monitoring systems, organizations try to overcome this problem with controlling people, with controlling employees who work at home. And my colleagues, especially my colleagues from Qatar, they've shared with us already this information about great psychological challenges that we have now and we go through now with this new pandemic crisis. And sometimes organizations, when they introduce a new management tools without checking them before, so that sometimes they increase these negative effects. So they add this negative impact on people, on their employees, while introducing these new tools without checking them before. So let me start first with some definitions. When we talk about new electronic monitoring systems, first we refer to systems, people, and performance of individuals, of groups on their jobs. Well, my focus here will be on electronic monitoring and processes used to collect, store, analyze, and report the actions of employees, or the use of surveillance systems. And today I will share with you some data on the most frequently used forms of electronic monitoring systems: telephones, video, internet, and the use of GPS to monitor attendance of employees and their work at home. So first, the first type of monitoring system that I use now are systems that allow employers to control time and attendance of employees. They use this system with the help of their personal computers. So these personal computers are supplied with a specific software that allows employers, first of all, do time tracking and work time logging of their employees, and then do productivity analysis after the working hours. Another type of monitoring system called online monitoring. And with the use of these systems, employers, first of all, can track and log employee activities during working hours. So you can see here on the picture that they receive very detailed reports: what were people doing during their working hours, were they typing, surfing internet, or doing something else. And also, they can log employees' actions on the computer with the use of different additional tools. So, for instance, they can record videos of employees' activities. And this is one of the problems that we have now, the main problems from my point of view, because before that, the crisis, when the people were working in offices, employers were using in-office cameras, trying to control activities of employees. But then we switched to this remote work, and people use their working computers at home. And some employees continue using cameras, but in this case, PC web cameras, to control employees' activities during the day. And sometimes they don't even inform people that they use PC web cameras to control their activities. And another types of control that are used to follow activities of employees when they are on remote work is the use of GPS to follow their movements, to follow their trips. Sometimes this is used to control that they follow restrictions and rules of lockdown, but sometimes these types of control are used to see what are people doing during their working hours, whether they are in shops, in parks, or they are working hard on their work assignments. And another very from my point of view, not so positive type of control is following conversation in messengers. Because now, with the use of modern software, employers also can control mobile phones of their employees, and they can follow their conversations during working hours, and then make some conclusions on that. As you can see from this brief analysis, modern techniques and modern technologies allow employers introduce very hurtful and negatively influencing tools of controlling employees when they are on their remote work. And as I said before, it adds different pressure, additional pressure on employees during these very tough times with coronavirus. So now let me summarize some, another type of control, remote control. I know that in some European countries, it is not allowed legally, but unfortunately, for instance, in Russia, we do not have this legislation, and employers can they can use K-logging, so keyboard spying over their employees. And they also use some additional software to protect data loss. But now let me briefly summarize some findings from theoretical investigations that I've looked through. And let me start with some positive outcomes of the use of electronic monitoring systems. And let me start with positive outcomes for organizations. So usually researchers outline following main positive outcomes. So first of all, employers can track activities of employees and block specific websites to overcome some threats. They can control games and apps that employees can run during working hours, receive live notification if employees access indecent control, and they try to increase information security with the use of this control system. And some positive outcomes for employees, so I found only one. So electronic monitoring system enable employees to track their activities at work to increase productivities by helping them to understand better how they are allocating their time. And now let me finish with some negative outcomes that I've outlined during summarizing the theoretical research. So first of all, the most important negative outcome is that employees may not comply with rules and procedures, so they can slack off on the job or can be engaged in deviant behaviors. So also when organizations impose control, they reduce autonomy and increase, of course, perceived job demands. Both factors, and as you can see from the point of view of these researchers, they contribute to burnout. Of course, close supervision increases stress. And also, for instance, in Russia, when employees apply to courts, so they try to somehow limit these activities of employers, at least in Russia, according to my research, courts. They are generally sided with employers. So this is more or less what I wanted to share with you. And of course, I'll be open to your questions after the end of this session. Thank you very much for your attention.
Tatiana. Now we have two speakers, Professor Sharp and Professor Ertelt from Hochschule des Bundesagentur für Arbeit, Germany. Sorry for my pronunciation. It's a university in German which specializes on training of people who are involved in regulating labor market, basically. It's a partner institution. We are involved in very interesting research and study project together. So Professor Sharp and Professor Ertelt, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lüftchen. You can see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic for the German labor market. We are coming from the University of Applied Labor Studies in Germany, in Mannheim, and the owner of our university is the Federal Employment Agency, one of the biggest public employment services worldwide. And we have around about 100,000 employees in our agency. And our title, the content of our title, we have 4 theses. And the first thesis is the Corona crisis has different characteristics than previous economic crises. Therefore, new labor market related instruments have been developed. And we want to show you the difference between the normal financial crisis and the Corona crisis. Corona has an evident impact on the German economy and the labor market. However, the Corona crisis cannot be compared with economic crisis in former time. Money alone is not enough to manage this crisis. Shutdowns and health protection dominate our daily life. And the most important goal is to contain the pandemic. In financial crisis, for example, in 2009, we had a big crash and a quick recovery of the economy. The recovery process in the Corona crisis is much longer. We had a strong boom phase in Germany in 2009. But in 2020, we already have light recessive trends as a result of Brexit and trade conflicts with the United States. The sectoral impact is also different. The financial crisis focused on the industrial sector, but in the Corona crisis, a lot of sectors are involved. For example, hotels, restaurants, trades, and cultural institutions, and so on. And last but not least, structural factors were not so relevant in the financial crisis, but in the Corona crisis, the transformation in Germany plays a very important role, especially the digitalization is more important. With regard of these new challenges, innovative and effective instruments have been developed to manage the crisis in Germany. And now I'll hand over to Professor Appel.
Thank you. The second thesis is the focus of labor market policy is currently on reducing negative employment effects such as unemployment and underemployment, which goes hand in hand with high risk for public finances. However, Germany has effective, active and passive labor market policy instruments to cope with the crisis. And you can see that now we are very successful in the last year. So you can see the newest figures from in the comparison between March last year and now November. And you can see that we have reached the same level of unemployment people, but keep in mind that the German unemployment statistic is a little bit higher than the international labor office. In the definition of ILO, we have in Germany 3.3. But in the German statistics, we have 5.1. This is the same level as before the crisis. And you can see that we have the short-term work is always reduced, and the vacancies are on a high level, especially inclusive training in the dual system of vocational training. And what measures do we have of the state and labor market policy? These are short-time compensation. If companies temporarily reduce working hours for economic reasons or as a result of unforeseen circumstance, and declare short-time working as a public employment agency, Bundesagentur für Arbeit, pays short-time compensation. And the second one is suspension of obligation to apply the insolvency. Companies that are obliged to apply for insolvency should be given as the opportunity to avoid insolvency by making use of government support, but also, if necessary, in the context of recognition of finance. And another one is financial support from the state for companies in the shutdown, especially in November, December last year, and bridge support like restaurant, bars, theaters, freelancers, and fixed cost support contribution. And the last one is tax measures, for example, reduction of sales tax, deferment of tax payment, suspension of enforcement measures. And the third cases now is the corona crisis is also seen as an opportunity to develop new organization and digital working conditions in companies, to create motivational incentives for employees and to increase work efficiency, like home office, teleworking, flexible work hours, promotion of work and life balance. And a special point, as other colleagues this morning has pointed out, that we have home office and mobile working before Corona. This was a very low level. You can see in the private sector, the small and medium companies, the proportion of home office workers rose to 22% in 2017. And two-thirds of employees rejected home office in principle, and 1 in 9 of the employees has an unfulfilled wish for home office. Home office use is very heterogeneous and depends on numerous factors. But this was before the crisis, and now now the percentage of people working completely at home has increased significantly during the pandemic. Women have moved to the home office much more since the beginning of the pandemic, and the perception of home office is positive, majority helpful and little stressful, and employees wish flexibility in home office also after the crisis.
Okay, the last thesis. The public employment service in Germany has a key position in labor market-related crisis management. Ladies and gentlemen, the German government has spent since March 2020 around about 460 billion euros to finance the pandemic consequences. It's very much. And now the Federal Employment Agency in Germany plays a key role in the crisis management. This is because the agency is responsible for implementing labor market policy instruments and for supporting companies The agency has done an excellent job in the last 21 months. Here we would like to underline 4 special points. Germany already has well-tested instruments to support the labor market, and the Federal Employment Agency has very good contacts and is very close to the companies, especially to small and middle-sized companies, enterprises. And the agency is able to counsel the companies competently. The agency has also an excellent infrastructure. The decentralization of the agency is a big advantage because the needs of companies and employees can be better considered. There are regional differences, and in the last 21 months, more than 30% of the staff of the Federal Employment Agency, around about 35,000 staff, supported companies to receive short-time compensation, especially during the first and the second shutdown. Professors and students from our university were also included. This shows the very high personal flexibility to manage the crisis. Furthermore, the agency has recruited additional 5,000 staff to support the measures. And in our point of view, every crisis is also an opportunity. Of course, we hope that the corona crisis will end soon. However, we should be prepared for the changes on the labor market, and these are turbulent times, but we are looking forward with interest to see what the future will bring. Thank you very much for your attention.
And in our view, the crisis has shown is that an economy, a national economy, which is weak, will be weaker more. But if we have a strong economy, even in the crisis, in the corona crisis, will overcome these problems better. And the German economy now is going on very, very well, as you have seen, and we hope that the individual problems, we have over 100,000 people are dead by corona. This is not acceptable for us. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Scharp-Undertelt, for sharing your insights into public policy in Germany with regard to employment and labor market. Well, the last but not the least is Professor Lyubimka Andreeva from St. Clement Akhridsky University in Sofia, Bulgaria. So, Professor Andreeva, you are the one to wrap up our today's discussion, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the organizers and for the invitations, especially to Tatiana Zaitseva. It will be my pleasure to share my thoughts about the challenges in human resource management and labor market. I will share also my screen because I have a presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. It is a brief presentation, but the main point maybe are 3. The ongoing global pandemic poses many challenges to human resource management. And some of the most frequently asked questions are 3 from my point of view and from my research. Those are what will happen to the labor market after the pandemic? What competencies should managers and employees will need? And finally, how will the pandemic and its consequences will affect human resource theory and practice? According to the first question, we can outroute short-term consequences and also long-term consequences. According to the short-term consequences, I will emphasize the unemployment processes during the pandemic and maybe after it. Here, this is maybe is a result of the slowdown of the world European also and also Bulgarian economics. For those of you, just to say, I'm from Sofia, from Bulgaria, working at Sofia University. That's why I mentioned national level of Bulgarian economics. And actually, the most vulnerable groups in this hypothesis are older workers, as well as people with lower education and skills. Another hypothesis is that employment will maintain certain levels as the virus spreads more easily in people of working age. And if also belong to those groups of people, young professionals or students will join the labor market. According to these first questions about the consequences of the labor market, we can also have 4 long-term trends. Those are work from home, and this is absolutely obvious. Social exclusion has forced many companies to introduce work from home. In education is the same situation, and this is again, absolutely obvious. Another point of view here is the electronic public services. This social exclusion and social distance brings necessity to changes in work of the state administration. As I mentioned, in Bulgaria, we don't have many electronic public services, but now we have some, let's say, there is a trend to go further in this this point of view. Also, I have I outlined also 2 long-term consequences for the labor market, and maybe the most positive one is the technology development. And another one is the robotization of the industry. According to the second question in my research, what competencies should managers and employees will need? In terms of future competencies, the biggest challenge is digital competencies and transformation. The essence of the digital transformation of human resources lies in the creation of a culture, a strategy of digitalization. I would like to emphasize this sentence because in Bulgaria, according to the public administration of the Bulgarian state, we have these digital competencies. They are in our public administration law. We have regulations, but actually the civil servants are not very common with these digital competencies. That is why I would like again to emphasize that the essence of digital transformation from my point of view lies in the creation of a culture strategy for digitalization. And According to the third question, I summarized three trends. And the first one is that the most neutral things is the change. And human resource management is changing significantly as a result of the pandemic. And the most important change, actually, this is the process working from home or remote work, wherever. There is two point of views. From one hand, it is okay for some of the industries, but from the other hand, there is a problem. The consequences should be required to flexibility, to approach with concerning all stakeholders in the process, employees and employers, managers or employees. However, the second part of the third question is the competency model, because I mentioned it that we have this digital competence model in Bulgaria, but it is only formal, and as a part of the management approaches to people in organizations, it needs to change due to the flexibility again of all stakeholders. And last but not least, it should be noted that both the short-term and the long-term consequences of labor market trends impose additional challenges on people governance. And maybe we have to, crises such COVID-19 have shown in general that we need to look at human capabilities, not only as skills related to digital processes, but also as skills for judgment between different social roles, emotional intelligence, personal skills for adaptability, and so on, which is, for me, is the biggest challenges for the future of human resource theory and practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Andreeva. We are done with all today's presentations. Now it's time to ask questions and to our last presenters in this specific section of our roundtable discussion. Does anyone have any question to those four esteemed professors? Everyone is tired, of course, and we're lagging far behind the schedule. I know that. I'm quite aware of that. so I'm not pressuring you to ask questions. Maybe someone wanted to
there is a question from Peter.
Peter, sorry.
Yes, please. It was really fascinating to listen to all these presentations. In fact, I've got an open question for everybody. Our HR colleagues mentioned that work has changed with the coming of flexi time and home office and the more focused ways of using the internet facilities and IT facilities. I would like to ask our colleagues here if they've experienced something similar with the students. I mean, I was pretty surprised to see this year that mostly our international students, but also the Hungarian ones, concentrated not only on Wikipedia and lower quality sites to collect information, but they are more intensively looking forward interesting stuff on YouTube. I mean, YouTube as a source of lecture series and films and documentaries has become one of my favorites due to the effect of my students. Have you seen anything like this in your area?
Well, let me start answering. Thank you very much. Very interesting question. I should say that we have the same tendency here in Russia, and this TED Talks format of these short movies in YouTube are extremely popular among our students. And we also had a very nice project organized by Qatar University. They had in March this, they called it TAD talks, thesis and dissertation talks, but they were made in TED Talks format, and our PhD students also participate in this event, and it was extremely interesting and popular among students. So I mean, yes, I think that it would be our future. We all should go to YouTube and have our short presentations over there.
And any other sites besides YouTube?
Sorry, once again?
Any other sites besides YouTube?
Well, of course, TikTok, but there is something extremely new. I mean, this format of 30 seconds, I don't know how to say, not movies, but well, still, yes, but no, not yet, not TikTok yet.
But Peter was asking about resources of new knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Both new knowledge and the new form of presenting knowledge to students. So the question is whether the pandemic has caused major shift here in the way students learn, in the way students, get information and process information.
Yeah.
Does anyone has anything to add to respond to Peter's question? Professor Koranvari, I hope you don't mind me calling you Peter.
Yes, it's of course.
You can call me Alexander as well, so no problem with that.
Спасибо.
Okay. Any other questions? Any dear colleagues? Any other questions? Okay, no questions. So maybe we can have a brief discussion. Anyone wants to react to something that's been said today, or to share some additional ideas that popped up in your minds after listening to other people's talks? Please, now it's time to tell something. Everyone is too tired, right?
I will go if nobody else wants to.
Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
I don't want to talk too much or take up time when anybody else wants to talk. What I forgot to mention in my presentation was also when I was asked about BRICS by Tatiana was how they work together. I forgot to mention as well with the sharing of information with regards to vaccines. You find the sharing of vaccine information between Russia and China and South Africa takes place a lot more than you will, for example, find first world countries sharing information. They tend to patent and keep information. So the sharing of information with regards to that between Russia, China, and South Africa, for example, and India took place a lot more than you would find within other countries. I forgot to mention that one. And then for the last comment on how the students teach, what we decided to do during the pandemic was, because we have a lot of online education and students were posted remotely all over. And as you know, connections in South Africa is a problem. Not everybody has access to the internet and Wi-Fi. was we provided students with Wi-Fi and access to be able to study, because usually you'll find they'll go to cities or they'll come to Pretoria and study, but now they were not able to. So in rural areas, they don't have that connectivity. So we gave all the students connectivity. And then we also broke up their tuition into smaller bits and asked them more assignments more regularly. So instead of doing a whole lesson, we would do half a lesson and ask like a short assignment, so that we can make sure they still do the learning and they still go through the work and don't just focus on the assessments. So we tended to break it up a little bit, so to make sure they still engage with their coursework.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else wants to add something? Peter, please go ahead.
Risking that you kill me.
I'm trying to lower my hand, but it doesn't want to.
Risking that you will kill me. One last thought that moves around in my mind after so many.
I think I have a problem on my side. Thank you.
After so many interesting things. When the unpronounceable hits the fan, when the house collapses on your head, it's never the state, it's never the firefighters, it's never the emergency squad that reaches you first. It's your neighbor that reaches you first. Is the person who is under probably the same house that has just collapsed on you, who reaches you first. So weak contacts, weak links between trained or untrained people, the everyday smile may be crucial in an epidemic or in any other crisis. Doesn't matter what the state does if your neighbors hate you. So thank you very much for letting me share this final comment.
I agree completely. Although we're discussing public policy and public administration here, but I agree completely.
Isn't that true for nations and countries?
Excuse me?
Isn't that true for nations and countries?
Yeah, well, it's true for me. I mean, I agree with you. I don't know whether everyone else agrees, but I think, and I was asking this question about social capital because I'm very much interested in how societies react to crisis situations, how your neighbors react, and whether those networks of trust and assistance get weaker or stronger under those circumstances of stress and crisis and so on and so forth. And the evidence is very, very contradicting. The evidence is very contradicting and very much is uncertain here. But I agree that networks are really important, and I think they're even more important under the current situation, current circumstances.
Probably you can do another conference on that.
Probably, yeah, let's discuss it. Let's discuss it. Okay, dear colleagues, dear participants, we've covered so many topics and we've viewed the situation from so many different angles. And we discussed so many different factors that shape the current situation with regard to different aspects of the pandemic and responses to it, that it's very difficult to draw one conclusion. What I can say for sure, I'm certain that the results or the ideas we carry away from today's roundtable discussion are of academic value by their own. So they have academic value, and I hope they will give an impulse, an incentive for us to think more, to research more, and to come up with more ideas in papers we write, in conferences, and in our lectures to our students. like we informed you previously, we'll send certificates of appreciation to all our participants, and thank you again. If anyone wants to share his presentations with all participants, so you can send your presentations to us and we'll disseminate them among the participants of today's discussion. Thank you again, and I hope we'll not just meet and discuss things. We'll be able to think about different projects of collaboration among ourselves and among our institutions. Thank you again, and I see you hopefully soon, and hopefully not just online but in person as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
all.
much.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice day.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
Tatjana.
Bye. Bye, Martin.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
До свидания.
До свидания.
До свидания. До свидания.
До свидания.